Wait, give me one sec. I wore this recently. What is it? So I want to go change into something I haven't worn recently.
Okay.
That seems like a normal thing to say to people.
Dude, or people comment, do you only have one shirt? Oh my, why can't I just fucking change it? What the fuck? Leave me alone.
Right, you know what? We'll let him get away with some stuff, you know. So just pretend, Razz, like this is just totally normal fashion what he's wearing. It's not, you know, he's not trying to pop off or anything. It's definitely not his favorite hoodie that, you know, he feels really fucking fly when he's wearing. It's like young Eminem or some shit, you know.
All right, I'm ready.
Oh, hey, how you doing, Loco? Yeah,
nice.
I know you were shit talking me, idiot.
I think there's a stain on the shirt that you're wearing.
No, there isn't. I get this.
All right.
Nice.
Thing is, I can't even see his jacket. It's just like there's just like a bar, and then there's his head, but there's nothing there. Like I can't.
Hilarious.
That's the head of.
It's vape. It's vape Adidas, Thorn. It's very hip.
Anyway, are we ready to start now?
Yeah, we're ready.
When pull out a pair of fucking sort of shades that Swizz Beats wears, where it's got like all diamonds on them and shit. Like, you're not just gonna do that at the beginning of the episode, right? Let's just start then. What episode is it? I think it's
15.
14.
No, it's 15. It's House 14.
Yes, because it wasn't out there, right? Yeah. Right, let's do it. Okay, this is gonna be episode 15 of Listen Loco. We're back. It's almost a new year. Not quite yet. Actually, I have a question along those lines. Loco, how does New Year work in Korea? Is it still on the same day? Or do you have a different day? I forget.
What do you mean? It's on January 1st. Or you mean Lunar New Year?
Obviously isn't, is it?
What? Oh, the time difference. Time difference. That's what you meant. Okay.
Oh, I mean, is like so Chinese New Year's on a different day than the 1st of January.
Chinese New Year's on a different year. That's Lunar New Year. That's different.
Yeah. Whatever. Almost New Year's. So we're going to talk about the LPL now, which, as I just was trying to establish there before Loco derailed it, technically for them might not be in a new year, even in a few days. But anyway, fuck me for trying to actually bring context and things Loco doesn't know outside his little fucking bubble into this show,
dude.
Razz, but I'll do it anyway.
Every time I bring context, every time I tell a story, you just shit on me and you're like, what's the context? What was that story for?
It is funny though, you can't lie. So anyway, listen, I never said this show was fair. I just prefer, you know, I don't know if you're aware of this. I just like to have fun all the time myself, but then, you know, deride other people for not having exactly the same fun as me. So anyway, along those lines, Razz here, formerly known as RazLPL, probably better to short it to Razz. Like I think you've done that progression where you've got it to be cooler and cooler over time, you know.
Yeah, there we go. I feel like whenever it comes to RazLPL, and the best thing is I would still be known as Razz, and you go into a new show, and it's like they still have the @RazLPL. I'm like, God Lord, man. It's like new audience. This guy's a clown, so I decided to clean it up.
Sure. Okay, so obviously everyone who has watched the LPL English broadcast knows who Razz is. He's been doing that for a few years now. He's been on many of my shows that were Narrative Wake that were about the LPL. I won't lie, not just because he's like my favourite person in the LPL. There are about 3 people I could even invite on those shows who watch all the games and can talk about all the teams. So he's had his fair share in the rotation. We've had him on quite a few times. But what's great is I'm really excited about today's episode because I always love episodes where Locodoco gets to talk to someone about a region he doesn't watch at all, and then even like do stuff like sort of cut them off as they're trying to give insight and just tell the person who watched every game what Loco thought based on like 1.5 games that he watched of it.
Then so what do you want me to do? Just stay silent? Of course I'm going to give my own opinion. Like, you fucking shit on me for actually participating in the show, and when I don't participate, you're like, it's just like, talk to Doran, why didn't you participate? You're fucking, fucked if I do, fucked if I don't. What do you want me to do? I get the guest. I produce the show, I make sure it's live, I balance out the sound, I get the editor, like I do so much and still get shit on. Oh my fucking God, like what do you want from me? I make the topic list and then you tell me the topic list is shit and then you stick to it, and then when I don't, the guest asks for the topic list, like fuck you Doran, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want from me?
I love you Loco, don't say shit.
Exactly. You can see, you know, we're starting the show on a good note. Everyone knows, you know, I've enjoyed it already. I'm in a good mood. So, right, Razz, here's the first question I have. It is actually about the LPL. which is for people who aren't aware, because this is something I have stressed so many times to people who don't watch the Chinese region, but they always forget it, is that one of the things I like about the Chinese region is it's not just 2 splits and then whoever goes to MSI or Worlds. There have always been third-party tournaments in the Chinese region. Obviously, the fact that like Tencent technically owns League of Legends means they can sort of get away with having a bigger circuit than other people. Now, back in the day, if we go back 4 years, yeah, that might be like, 6 or 7 lands that are separate. Now it's mainly just Demacia Cup that some people might know about. And then there's that NEST tournament that was like a few months back. I noticed the NEST one was like already those tournaments aren't as important as they were a few years back. So can you explain, because the Demacia Cup one just finished, what is the context behind I notice most of the teams play in the competitions, but some of them don't use their real lineup or don't use the full lineup. Some of them test subs. Is it like a scenario with the Kesper Cup where it's like you have to play? Like, what is the situation with these competitions?
So you don't necessarily have to play, but you have to at least find meaning in the tournament. And especially after Worlds or after just a long-ass split, a lot of these teams just create their own meanings. So for a good example is like RNG never really joins NEST. They just say decline the invitation. OMG is a good example of like, hey, they could play, and they probably should play if they want to get better because they're not really playing well in the LPL. But they find their own purpose of just like, hey, we're just going to throw in our trainees. They don't get a chance during the regular season, so why not just actually give them some time? Because ordinarily they'd be playing on the LDL, or even they're not playing in the LDL. We just have a shitload of players anyways. Another example is EDG. EDG just didn't put in their full roster in NEST, so they decided to put in their youth team that was in the LDL. So it's kind of cool to just be able to get that. Obviously, for the audience, they would like to see like the main rosters come in, but it's more so the idea of, once again, there are just so many games during the regular season for these teams, and then a lot of these teams that go to Worlds, it's like, when are we actually going to get a time off? So, it's not obligatory to join, but a lot of these teams could just make use of it anyways. I would just like RNG to use their Royal lineup from LDL if they could, but that's just up to them.
Yo, what the hell is LDL? Is it LSPL? Like now it changed into LDL?
Yeah, it's a combination of TGA and LSPL. So like TGA was basically the real Challenger tournament. It's ridiculous. So for North America and Europe, they have the Challenger
LSPL is
team,
basically academy, right? Where it's like you can't get promoted out of it. It is just your second team or a separate league, right?
Well, for LSPL, you can promote into the LPL. So like it's a 3-tiered system of TGA teams or like startup Challenger teams that try and promote into the LSPL. And the LSPL is like an actual structured league. Then you try and promote into the LPL. So it's like, it was pretty damn ridiculous if you wanted to be able to get into the LPL in that fashion. So now the LDL is a developmental league where people do have just sister teams coming in, but then it's interspliced with this like actual different teams, different organizations. A good example is actually the Spring Split champions of Tyloo. Tyloo people will know from CSGO. And so they were pretty damn good, but then obviously they had to change rosters going into Summer Split. And there's still people that promote in. So LPL is different in the sense that, like, sure, it's a franchise league, but there's still a promotion system for teams like the Summer Champions of LPL.
Because they're expanding it, right?
Exactly. So, like, right now it's 16 teams where it used to be 14 teams.
Okay. So anyway, I don't want to go too much into the off-season tournaments, as obviously most people watching the show barely know the LPL and want to know the basics. But I thought one thing that was worth addressing with them is, like, as you said, because you even get the top teams playing sometimes. The world champions have already played. They actually played in this tournament. They even lost the series in it. They lost, I think, top, right? And then they won the tournament anyway. So was it actually played out like a competitive? Was it a serious tournament to you? Were people cruising? Is the world championship team losing something bizarre? I mean, to put it in context of what I asked about the Kesper Cup, obviously we've seen it happen with the Korean teams many, many times where whoever wins world can go home and lose the Kesper Cup or whatever, you know. It's not like it's impossible, but is it a scenario akin to that?
Yeah, I would say it's akin to that. Like, for instance, IG were champions, and this is the first tournament they joined up into. And on top of that, like, so they even at one of the series, I think it was versus Rogue Warriors, formed West, an AD carry they haven't played throughout the entire, like, year for, like, this time around. So, like, you just saw them playing to win, obviously, but, like, the amount of effort they put into the tournament was not nearly as much as TOP. Like, TOP literally was the first team to form, like they're the first roster that really came into a game house and then just started practicing and religiously for the tournament. So, like, it was a good indication of TOP being ready for the tournament. While IG was just kind of, they obviously wanted to come in and win, but they're just really focused on the LPL rather than the Demacia Cup itself.
Okay. Right, Loco. This year, obviously, most people knew about RNG because they were winning all the competitions. We saw them internationally. Like, how much LPL did you actually watch? Like, how interested were you in the league this year?
Almost non-existent, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm actually kind of curious about. So after what is it? The Worlds was done. Like Kelsey said some stuff. Who's the other one? Frost Karen said some stuff about teams like Jingdong Gaming, which I thought was
Yeah.
like a made-up name. Like oh yeah, there's this team called Jingdong. Like and about Yagao.
Does
Knight.
sound like some shit that if Sven Skaren said he would just get banned immediately for 3 games for no reason. Like even though it's not even racist, you know.
Like Yagao. They were mentioning players like Yagao, Knight, Zoom, that they're saying
Yeah.
that these players are almost good as like Rookie and TheShy. I was like, I don't know. Rookie and TheShy look incredibly good at Worlds. So you're telling me there's players in LPL that are almost as good as like the people that actually went to Worlds and won. I'm like, interesting. So that's when I
Like definitely competitive. I would say that they're just ridiculous tiers like Rookie and TheShy that just wins their game just based off of their pure mechanics alone. But I agree in the sense that like Yagao are players that like can compete with them, that will go up against them in lane, that won't lose up against them, and will like have insane team fights. So like LPL is a region of mechanics. You'll see that in their games a lot of times. Like the games are just like so hectic. Like a good example is like Demacia Cup is nowhere near like the same game as Kespa Cup, where you're watching Kespa Cup, and a lot of it is like still a little slower. Like the commentators can actually recollect their thoughts and talk about the next play. While in Demacia Cup, it's actually just fight after fight after fight, and who ends up winning the series is like literally just the mechanical players. So that's why like the finals is an indication of like Knight. Knight is an insane mid laner. He's probably our second best mid laner in the league next to Rookie. I say probably. I should just say 100%. And people hype him up. I hype him up. He should have been Rookie of the Year this year, except for the fact that due to like the contractual fucking, he just like didn't play in the summer. So that's like I agree. Like Yagao, Zoom, like all of these young players, people will hear more about them. It's just that no one watches that. Like not a lot of people watch the league to begin with, and then they're new faces.
So if Rookie's a 10, what is a Knight? Like what's his square if Rookie is the 10?
I would just easily say 9, in the sense that Rookie can beat. I mean, Knight can beat Rookie in lane. Can, but not will like consistently. Rookie is the best mid laner, but Knight should be the second, if not third. I'm just trying to recollect where I would put like mid laners like Faker and all that, but I would still say that second, or Caps, but I would say second place would be Knight. And it's based off the fact that we just haven't seen him on an international stage, but that's the faith that I give him. Because every single time I say, well, he won't do it in spring split. He's a rookie, even though he's been like a solo queue demon, but he comes out and he's like a stellar player on like his second or third week into the split. So like he learns incredibly quickly, and he can play to a style, and he basically changes other players to play to his meta. So like the picks that he had in the spring split of this year, like the Echo, Corky that he brought back, like all of that shit that people had to just literally respect and play towards. Like he does that just because of how skilled he is. So I think he's second best in the world, or at least will be. I'm gonna say will be.
If he gets a
Because,
chance
like,
to prove it, sure.
Yeah, he needs to. He literally needs the chance.
Where did he come from? What team is he on? And can you go a little bit more about his style? Like for a lot of Western audiences, like this is probably the first time hearing about him.
Yeah. Okay, so young Chinese player. He originally came from Young Miracles in the LSPL. He tried to like promote into the LPL consistently. He found himself in the promotion tournament, but like there's always one reason or another, like some 80 carry that wasn't not that good. Specifically talking about Voy when he was there, but he's super skilled. Kind of was just a solo queue demon because even though he was a Chinese player, would always be rank 1 in Korea. So he was rank 1 for the longest time. Then Tarzan came up and got him. Went through Suning, got picked up by Suning originally. His play style was that he was always like a 1-3-1 type player. He would play like Assassins. I already mentioned the Echo. Corky to the extent that he wants to be able to put himself on side lanes. Akali, even though she's broken, he just wanted to be able to play challenge champions that like give him the ability to go for like solo plays. And he was more like a highlight player, a superstar. So like a lot of times, like when he was on Suning, he would always find himself in side lanes, and maybe if he pushed out too much and the enemy teams would try and challenge him in like in a 2v1 situation, he would get like a 2v1 kill, and he'd be like, all right, well, I mean, no other team would be able to get away with this except for like Sinning at that time when they had Knight. So I honestly, with TOP, I expect them to put as much resources in, like C9 and Jensen. Now, I guess Team Liquid and Jensen, perhaps, if they do that. I expect that kind of style to reign true with TOP because he does, I would say he does demand resources to be put into him. Initially, in the first bit on Sinning, it was like, do we put into Xiao like top lane or do you put him to him? And then like slowly, because of how skilled and consistent he was, they just slowly put it into him.
Okay. What about Yagao? He's also someone that I heard a lot about. Like, could you give us the same kind of treatment for him? Like, where he came from, what team he plays on, and kind of his play style?
Yeah, he also, like, that's the thing about the LSPL, like, or at least the LDL, is that they all just basically come from there. Yagao came from Moss 7 Club in that team, which is now basically a farming team. Like, you're just going to hear so many players that are coming from that team that are now in the LPL. He was a player that does play a lot of carries, but I think his stylistic similarities are very much true to, like, Doinb. Now, Doinb now is, you know, some bit of, like, a resource hog, but he plays a lot of supportive picks. Like, right now, the most, I would say most played for Yagao is probably just like Galio. So he's a type that like you really don't know what he's going to play in a series. It's going to be like maybe in the best of 3. First game he's going to play Galio. Third game he's going to play like Yasuo. So he just really plays to what the composition asks of him. He's very silent too. There was one time where we put him on the desk and we tried to like, you know, we literally talked to him like what to expect out of JD at the time that he was playing. And he just literally said, no, like, we will speak through our actions. Literally just, like, very silent type. So, like, a lot of times when we ask, like, oh, what are we going to get him for the next interview? It's like, we're probably going to get Zoom, a little bit more, you know, someone who likes to talk, someone who likes to talk a little bit more. But Zoom is Yagao has always been the type to just, like, want to be able to perform rather than speak. So, like, that's been his thing. Silent type, but kind of like a ridiculous performer. I didn't see too much out of him in Moss 7 Club when he was playing in the LDL. I thought he was a great mid laner, but I thought the improvement that he'd had from the LSPL into the LPL was like ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, thing is, when you said before, Loco, like, you know, you knew the top teams basically, but you didn't know any of these other people. Like, that's actually probably the biggest misconception to this day about the LPL, which is that it's like LCS, where if you watch the best LCS teams, at least in the past, maybe before franchising, it was very top heavy. Like, most of the best players were on Cloud9 or now Team Liquid, formerly Curse, or TSM, or CLG, you know, like, generally there was this stratification of teams like that. Whereas one of the things that has always been ridiculous about the LPL, in part because you had too many teams who had enough money that they're not just going to let people go for no reason, and this culture of signing players very young but to a long contract, it meant that you didn't, in the past, like, it's not like someone would identify like a player for like the 7th best team and just be like, let's just get him immediately. Like that sort of thing didn't always happen. So you actually, every year going back pretty much to the beginning of the LPL, you had players who play for teams that are never going to get to Worlds, but who are amazing players. One of my favorites of all time has to be like Flandre, the guy who's the Snake top laner. And obviously Snake has had times where they flirted with being a team that could have made it to Worlds, but they never made it, obviously. And because they've never made it, except for the players who did play internationally, people won't know any of their players. I mean, if you've ever seen this guy's an amazing top laner, full-on carry top laner as well, if it's the right meta, you know. So, but you never hear him in a conversation with Smeb and the other guy because he doesn't go international, unfortunately. So you have to watch the LPL to know. A great example that people now might understand is obviously the guy who's now on SK Telecom, Clid. This guy was a monster in the LPL. Yeah. But if you didn't watch the LPL, again, he'd never even enter the top X conversation, which I presume now he probably will. Now he's in SK Telecom. So the talent's pretty spread out in the LPL, right?
100%. Like, it's such a dog-eat-dog world in the LPL because, like, or just in China in general. Because you get so many ridiculous players that are coming from the LDL, that are coming just from like tiny solo queue, and so for them to actually be able to prove themselves on an LPL performance, like, doesn't happen. Because more often than not, there are teams that are giving the let's just say Korean players or like, you know, imports a chance first because they've proven themselves. So for you to make a name for yourself, such a name that you're like, well, actually, we're going to be putting you into this team rather than like someone from LMS or Korea. Or Vietnam, for instance, because we're just getting a lot of Vietnamese junglers so far. like that's insane. So 100%, like, mechanics are a given. Like, that's a priority. You have to have mechanics to be on some of these teams.
So the last player, Zoom, I think that was the player that Kelsey, I think, told me might be even better than TheShy. Like, is she just blowing hot air? Like, how good is this Zoom guy and what does he do? Like, where is he from?
Zoom once again. I think it was a DS LDL player, top laner coming in. I thought that he was like one of the top laners to look forward to. He was the best top laner in the LDL. Bring him onto this team, and he was known for being like TheShy is known for just raw mechanics, so he'll just go with like constant carry picks. Zoom is like, once again, whatever the coach tells me to pick, I'll play it incredibly well. Scion has been one. Like, it was a time where he just like liked to pick his own pick. There was like a Yorick pick early on in the split, but he always had side lane pressure. His stats are always insane in laning phase, but also just like a strong team fighter. So I thought his IQ was great. Is he as strong as TheShy? Hell no. I think it's like TheShy. If I'm just like rating top laners in the league, TheShy, Xiao Al, and then I would go Zoom as third. But then there's the debate internally about like Zoom versus Xiao Al. And TheShy only, like, the only way people downplay TheShy was based off of his year performance, where like he was super strong in spring, got injured, and then like when he finally came back, he wasn't as strong. But obviously he was like warming back into the meta, the team. Like, obviously he had like a hand injury. Like, what the hell? You're not going to be playing as well as you did in the past. But then he got better coming into the playoffs. So I always thought that TheShy was by far the best top laner in the world. And then if you're talking about within the league, Zoom and Xiao were just next to that point. I think Xiao is something that I really want people to know. He's from Suning, and I know Suning has turned into a super team, and he's a player that like came in playing carries. Like, Jax was a play that he went on towards like consistently in the beginning of the split. And then when the team lost Knight, suddenly they only had like really one carry. I guess you can say Fury in the bottom lane, but Fury was more of like a stable player that wasn't really playing the hyper carries. They weren't putting as many resources into him as well. But literally Xiao would be solo carrying his team. And I felt like Xiao, Zoom, a lot of the Chinese top laners coming in changed the region from being, let's say 2015, you'll remember like they require Korean top laners to be competitive, to now just really looking into their developmental teams and then like having probably the best top laner pool in the world. If you're looking to Korea, then you can say there are a lot of great Korean top laners, but like Chinese top laners are now combating that.
So
Okay.
LPL is probably one of the hardest major league for casual English speaking viewer to get into. I mean, obviously NALC is the easiest, then probably Europe or LCK, and then LPL. Like, why is it that way? And for casual viewers to get into LPL, where would you like tell them to start? And yeah, a little bit on that.
So I think the reason why it's so difficult is because the schedule consistently gets harder and harder for people to consume. I've always had an issue with League of Legends being a little bit too oversaturated with games, because like there's every region happening at the same time. Korea is literally happening at the same damn time as the LPL. So LPL is like focused, of course, on the domestic market, and so there are now 6 days of games being played.
Wow.
Like literally, 2 series a day for each day, and then Saturday and Sunday is when you have 3 series being played. And then at times they're literally happening at the same goddamn time because they're happening in different venues. There's a series happening in Beijing, usually the RNG series. OMG plays in Chengdu, Chongqing for Snake. So like a lot of the times, I mean, they're playing to their own audience, especially the ticket holders. So like if you're trying to say, hey, you know what, follow your best teams, but now they're conflicting with RNG that's playing in Beijing, but maybe even the SKT that's playing in Korea, like that's already incredibly difficult to ask for. So for the English broadcast, we cover like 4 days. You know, it's like we cover 4 days and we try and catch people back up onto it. And I think just the names is probably the biggest one. Like Korea has always had the names that you will remember, organizations' names, the player names that like have stayed throughout, like Ambition obviously retiring this time around. But then in China, like there are so many teams that it kind of feels like it's a bit much to start. Like where do I start? Is it this JD team that just came up out of nowhere? EDG is probably the best one. It's the easiest one to get into as well as like RNG. I would say WE, except 2018 was like an awful year. So it's a little bit difficult to ever get into because of the time zones, the amount of games, and literally like where do I start? That's where I think the problems lie.
Right, let's do this. We'll talk initially about the teams that were at Worlds. That way I can actually get Loco to, give his opinion, start to get in the mix. And then we'll ask about the other teams later on, and we'll go based on like how interesting it is, because we're not going to talk about all of them. There's too many teams in the LPL, and some of them are just too obscure even for people who watch the LPL. Because to tag on to what you were saying there, that's always for me been one of the reasons the LPL has been so hard to get into is, like I said before, the sheer number of tournaments that they have there, as well as the LPL, added to how many teams were in the LPL. Remember, they had that many teams almost back when there was like 8 teams in an LCS. So the sheer number of games, they went to best of 2 way before when everyone else was on best of 1. Like, just the amount of matches, you can't watch it. Like, what's mad is it's actually more like a real sport. Like, hello, are you Chinese? Do you like League of Legends? Here is all the Chinese League of Legends you could want to watch. Problem solved. Like, it's only in the Riot world where people start thinking, right, I should be able to watch the EU LCS and then the NLCS and then LCK. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, there are different sports leagues around the world. Like, either we're esports, which is the old school thing where you just have a tournament and everyone watches it, or it's a sport and we've got regional leagues. Like, it's actually more in line, the LPL, with the way it logically could be. And obviously, crucially, you don't actually need any outside viewers when you've got all the China watching. So you don't really need the 10K people that might still up and watch the LCK or whatever. So anyway, the first team that everyone obviously wants to know about is the one I alluded to before, the world champions, Invictus Gaming, the team which was in so many times prime position to maybe win the LPL. They looked like they could do it, but famously kept getting countered by losing to RNG every time it mattered. This team, as I said, won the Worlds, came back, lost the series in this Demacia Cup, won the Demacia Cup anyway. Again, not a super serious tournament. The big question is this, Razz. Since they have retained the lineup, and in theory, that they're reigning world champions, I have 2 questions here. One, do you think that their situation where they've lost some of the coaching staff, is that significant? And then the other part is, are you someone who thinks that they can just take what they did at Worlds and transition that, and it's time for them to win the LPL?
I don't think the coaching staff loss is that significant. I think a lot of the times when we were looking to the coaches, they had Mafa for such a long time. He got himself out off stage, put in
Coach Kim.
Coach Kim.
Yeah.
There we go. And so now he's on Damwon, and I think that like the coaching changes. There has always been memes. I didn't know too close like what was the facts of like how decisions were made on the team, but a lot of the time it was player dominated is what I've heard, and a lot of it was just based off of like what the internal coaching staff, like Coach Mafa, said. And Coach Mafa is still on the team, and I think he's going to be in front in terms of the actual stage coach. So I don't think that's too significant. And yes, I think that they're just going to be as dominant as they were in at Worlds. Like the problem was in spring finals, I said that IG were going to beat RNG. That wasn't, or at least in semifinals, that was going to be the case. That wasn't because they used Duke, and I think that if they had TheShy, that would have been different. Once again, with how close that series was. In finals, they had everything. They literally had all the cards straight, and they still lost to RNG. So like that's still a matchup to watch closely. I think the major point is like a focus is going to be in their bottom lane, because Uzi just makes you play towards him. Like Uzi is like the trick, like the biggest card trick in League, where it's just like if you go to Worlds and you're playing up against RNG for whatever reason, you have to play towards bottom lane. You don't have to play to your style for whatever reason. You're like, no. We have to stop bottom lane from getting absolutely thrashed. I think G2 did it right by saying that's not how we're going to play. And I think IG is slowly getting to that point where it's like, yeah, let's play to TheShy and Rookie, and 2 lanes are better than 1, and we can just focus on like once we get Rookie as big of a league as possible, we can head bottom lane. Like that's been the case where like previously in spring, like Jackie Love has either failed because he's like had nerves issues, or just of course on top of that is never as good as Uzi. And then in Summer's play got much better at that. And then I think at Worlds, while that matchup never came to be because G2 beat RNG, I thought if that matchup had happened once again, not only is throughout the tournament, Jackie Love had been performing incredibly well and had been confident enough to take the series on. I just thought that slowly, because it's his rookie year, literally year 1 for the kid, and he was gotten to the point where he could take on Uzi. I think the matchup would be different. So I think if we're going to a spring split, I would still say IG comes out dominantly.
Right, Loco, obviously everyone knows TheShy and Rookie, especially from Worlds, like they were the stars of the show, you know. But as Raz mentions here, like the bot lane is the part where people have had their qualms about Invictus Gaming. Obviously, historically, even in the org, the bot lane's never really been their primary focus. What did you think of the bot lane? Because I remember one of the reasons why you thought that they would win the final was that you thought the support power line would play a lot better. So what did you think of Jackie Love? What do you think of the bot lane of IG?
Well, so it was hard for me to have like a very complete understanding of them. So Ning and Baolan were enters in the group stage, and I thought, oh, these players outside of All-Star and Camille look very, very bad on their comfort champions. And when I watched them play in final, I was like, holy shit, like Baolan is insane. Ning is probably the best jungler in China, maybe even in the world. So it was hard for me to have a complete understanding. And same thing for like Jackie Love. He looked like kind of shitty in groups. And then in KT, he had a pop off. And also at finals, like he played very well on Kai'Sa too. So yeah, it was hard for me to have an overall understanding. But it seemed like they're players with incredibly high highs and incredibly low floors. Like, are they consistent players? Like, how are they, Razz?
Oh man, I would say Ning is consistent. I'll say Ning is consistent. Funny enough, because like throughout the year, like I had him as second place in my like jungle tier list, and it's always like for those China junglers, it's like so hard to like rate them because literally he's flanked by the best lanes in the world. So it's like if he fails, then obviously he's the shittiest jungler. Like how do you fail with the resources given to you? But, like he doesn't. And in fact, he expands the league, goes forward. Like the stat that he like comes out consistently that you look at and you're like, oh, this is a bad stat. It's like how often he dies, but that's usually because of how quick the games end. They're the fastest, like they're literally the fastest team in China, in the world, and they do that through just like, if they find an opportunity to end the game off of a bottom lane dive in Hib Tower, he will be the one to do it, and he will obviously die for it. So like that's, for him, he's always like the jungler with the highest IQ, the most consistent jungler to play through his top side. I think that he's the most consistent one. Baolan has been a nod case in the sense that like their resources are never going bottom lane, so he knows his role of just trying to like basically like survive if it's a bad bottom lane or go all in otherwise. And that's the all in aspect happens a little bit too frequently. The predominant voice in the lane is Jackie Love, so like he's OG Draven player. The mentality that like he always goes back to is like, okay, why not just go for a 2v2? So even though the inconsistencies like you'd question is predominantly, I would say, in Jackie Love more than it is in Baolan, where the calls are just made to go 2v2 even though they don't have their jungler. So if there's ever a failure on IG, like you'll watch on Demacia Cup and you'll see them either hard stomping lane because they are better than the lane opponents and the enemy team jungler wasn't ready, or they're just like they themselves are feeding. And I think that's what like when analysts talk about China, or like Frost Gearin goes on the desk and like talks about it, that's the IG they see is like Jackie Love and Baolan being so confident in their 2v2 that they'll go in without necessarily having the jungler. They've gotten better at that. That's still something you have to watch out for with IG.
Well, that seems so counterintuitive. If you have the best top lane in the world, if you have the best mid lane in the world, why not play more utility? Why do you play for the 2v2 so much? Why do you like these aggressive picks so much?
Oh, because like if you watch like their regular season like was historic in the sense that like they just don't lose 18-1, 18-1, and a lot of it was just based on like every lane hard stomping, like 20 CS difference like in mid lane, top lane, and like bottom lane. So if you just win consistently by like winning every lane, then your bottom lane gets that confidence embedded in. Like, why would I not like fight? That's what happened with Fnatic versus IG in game 1, and then in game 2 in Worlds. Where it was like game 1, they stomped the lane, but then game 2, like Jackie Love was getting smashed by Reckless because you just have that confidence in you because you've been winning out laning phase the entire year.
When your dynasty is built upon something so fragile as like winning all 3 lanes and not having a good balance, I feel like that can be really poisonous to the long-term stay of a dynasty.
True, but like this meta is not helping. Like this meta is like super focused on lane now.
Yeah.
Like the major issue IG had was in their team fighting. Like throughout the entire year, they were slowly getting better at it. But like I would always say, team fighting JD will win. Team fighting RNG will win. But then it never gets to that point. So like right now the meta is beautiful. Worlds meta was great because it's like solo lane meta, which is why I think that they moved from being, for me, like a 4th place team at Worlds. Like I thought 2 teams I thought that would be much better than was obviously KT. And another one I thought would be a Freak of Freaks. both teams that were not necessarily known from like super strong laners. Keen is a great player, sure, but he's mostly known by like his great team fighting, or at least post 10 minutes, and then they just get smashed. So I think IG, they're probably not gonna perform as well if the mid-season patch is like 40 minutes, baby. But right now it's a perfect time for them.
Yeah, I mean, talking a little bit about the meta. One thing that changed...
Wish I fucking could. Just you asking him questions all the time.
Okay, talk about the fucking meta then.
I can't even get a word in. I'm a professional who's worked my entire life on shows. So all I'm waiting for is him to stop speaking, and then I can't just jump right on his word. I have to wait a second, and you're just right there like... And another question I had is like, are you ever going to give an opinion? Or well, I'm going to give an opinion.
Dorian, okay, but what do you fucking think of the meta? What do you think about turret plating then?
What's going on, man?
Is that the best you can...
Okay, no, Dorian.
Yeah.
All right, Dorian. So the meta has changed where there's turret plating.
You know what the talk show is? We make up a point, he talks about it, we talk about it. It's called a conversation.
Okay, then say your part in the conversation. Why do you have to attack me? Why can't we just have a normal show? Why do we have to get attacked? You fucking bag on me for, what is it? Not participating, so I'm trying to participate. Oh my god. Have your say, Dorian. I
was trying to stop fucking talking. For someone who can't shut up, you can't stop talking, can you, daft con?
Oh
anyway,
my god.
Razz, this is how, you know how conversation works, mate. You're not Korean.
Yeah.
So, what you were talking about there with the angle on, like, the fact that their bot lane is so aggressive, and if you saw any of the interviews with Jackie Love, like, he doesn't talk as though he's, like, the clean-up AD carry, and, you know, like, he's subservient to the other lanes. Yeah. He's out there trying to, like, beat Uzi and be called the best Chinese AD carry, even though if you look at the composition of their team, even if he was actually the best, it'd probably be impossible to show it on that team. But as you said, this is the part I wanted to ask was, there's two angles to this. One, I totally get why they played that style of all the lanes going ham, because as you said, they were just fucking snowballing every game. It was ridiculous. Like, when people used to say in Korea that, like, KT Rolster was the snowball team, right? Or King's Own Dragon X in the spring, where they were really, really strong. Like, yeah, they snowball in a Korean way, though, where it's like, right, you build up all your advantages, and then you try and win. Like, IG was literally, like, I could totally have seen Worlds going the other way if the meta had been different. So you know the story with Royal Never Give Up? That when they lost, after they lost, that rumor came out that they'd won, like, you know, like 40 scrims in a row or something mad. And so when you hear that, it's not really, it's hard to blame the person when they then fail completely, because you're like, well, to be fair, like, practice was telling you everything you do works. Like, I actually thought the same thing could have happened to IG if the meta had been different, because if anything, with the team they had, it would actually make logically more sense to use Duke more often, because he could actually allow you to play through bots sometimes if it made it. But since TheShy, as you say, a lot of people consider him a better individual player. I actually thought the fact that they did so well and the only team they were ever losing to was RNG might make them think like, no, this is the best way to do it. Put all your best players in, and then at Worlds we'll just do this as well. And as long as we don't play RNG, we'll be fine. But actually the meta bizarrely took a shift where somehow that worked. What do you think on that angle? Like, are you one of these people that thinks they got a bit lucky with the meta at Worlds?
I think they got lucky. I think like if they played to a team fight meta, then they would have lost in quarters to KT, or maybe lost in I don't know about semifinals, because that one's just a stomp. But like, I would say if the semifinals were like RNG, or if RNG didn't like just harden the first series, then like 100% that a team fighting team would have been able to beat them. But regardless, like, I think the addition of this five-finger mentality. This is something that like LGD was known for, where they just had all the 5 best players possible. It didn't matter that you're playing in your individual bubbles and you would just win lane and win game. Like, I think this was like a mentality that they didn't necessarily always have. Like, they won in the spring split and summer split with it, but were aware. They were aware that they were like not as good team fighters, and they were getting better at that, to the point where in Rift Rivals, like, you saw a little bit of a different IG, and then in the summer split, you were like, okay, well, they're actually team fighting well versus RNG, so it's not like a complete stomp in that direction. So I thought they were getting better in that direction, but against the best teams at team fighting, I thought they would fail. And I thought TheShy actually, like 2017 Shy, like TheShy in the previous year was like a bad team fighter in terms of like he was like his first real year at it, where his teleports were nice. Good. His tank play, he was just like in team fights, wasn't really in position as well. But that he's a talented player. He's a smart player. He obviously with time got better at that. So like right now, I would say that TheShy is better at that than Duke. I think the only problem is the mentality of that, Where if like right now, if TheShy plays Scion, he's not gonna build full tank. He's gonna he's gonna go straight towards Iceborne Gauntlet or something. You know, like he's always in the carry mentality, even with he plays tanks. I think that his team fighting is better. I think his TP's got better. So like in that discussion of one player being better than the other in terms of actual team fighting and helping out the other side of the map, I think if you are that talented, you can do whatever you want. You can play tanks better than the other tank player. It's just like, are you in the mentality of giving? Are you in the mentality of like taking a step back and saying that I don't have to care about lane out too much? And I think that's where TheShy only really fails, is like just saying, hey, I'm in Scion, I'm just gonna go straight towards the usual build rather than the one that's gonna give me the most damage.
Okay. See, Loco, when you said that, like your counter to it of like, that's bizarre because, you know, if you had like the 2 best solo laners in the world, why not just play through them and like, you know, have bot kind of just play safe or just play utility champs and make the comp work more? Like, I get what you mean by that, but that is also like a Korean way of looking at League of Legends. Like, you could also use the logic of if you can make it work, think of the insane map pressure you're just putting on the opponent constantly. Like, where does this jungler go? Where do they get ganks off? And if they do get ganks off, do they just bleed in another lane where they're not? Like, it's actually a nightmare scenario if the team can do that. I agree, it's got to be the most fragile style imaginable because if it breaks, you're just fucked. But if it works, it's pretty amazing, as we saw Worlds.
Yeah, I mean,
and the jungle is the most crucial part of that shit, because like honestly, if you have like 3 lanes constantly pushing, God bless. And then like what you have to think about what the enemy jungler is doing. If he's in your jungle consistently or just trying to track you down, like that is the most insufferable way to actually like play League of Legends. So I think that's what really is key to Ning, is that like he makes the best with having like the best lanes pushing forward consistently.
Well, there's
putting that out there.
It's like a burden of execution when you have 3 lanes that need to win, and then as Razz talked about, like jungler that needs to be at the right spot. Like if any of those things go wrong, then it can break down at any of the aspects. But if you only have 2 lanes that are really playing aggressive and 2 lanes that you are playing to and that you are drafting towards, like it makes it much easier. And also when you have tanks, your team comp is much more well-rounded, and mid game it's a lot easier to play. It's just like when you have a dynasty, like you want it to be solid and you want it to be like repeatable, and you want to have like a really good foundation and a basis to build off of. And it seems like IG's dynasty is built off of mechanical prowess and just being straight up better than other people. And I'm not sure how long TheShy and Rookie can maintain like having or being ahead above every solo laner.
I think that's just the state of the game, though. I think dynasties are cracking just because the state of the game is really like not stable anymore. The game is just so focused on like you just have to be better players that you're getting to a point where like EDG's gotten worse. They tried to restructure. EDG's used to be the team where it's just like we just got the best players, man. Like Name, great player in China, doesn't matter. Like if you have one bad result, then we just get deffed from Korea. It's a bit insane in that aspect, where they were the team that were like, we play as solid as possible. We're the better, not mechanical players. Like, why we had great mechanical players on the bottom side of the map, but we were better macro players, like better 30-minute players. But then if the meta is like, actually, you just have to, we have a stopwatch, and the game's like essentially ends at like 15 minutes in terms of like how well you guys are doing in lane. Then you have like not only just like the best macro teams in China starting to falter and now focusing on mechanics more than not. But also just regions like Korea is a great example where like I would say the biggest tragedy for Korea at Worlds was literally just individual players being the most important thing. That Africa Freaks was known as being the best drafting team and the best best rotational team. I thought that their way to play around their jungler was great. But then
Spirit, sorry.
Yeah, I always have that problem. Even when Spirit was in China, I had that issue. But then he didn't even get the chance to play the game. So I think that the meta is moving to a position that completely negates team fighting and macro play. You just have to be strong as hell players, like TOP is turning out to be, or maybe like TSM perhaps. And then you just kind of have to have faith in that. If you lose based off of like a poor decision, then like that's pretty easy to resolve if you have good enough coaching staff.
Okay. Well, Doran, do you want to talk about the general meta a bit? There isn't going to be any more bigger preseason patches. Like meta is kind of what the preseason tournaments has been. So, Doran, have you watched any of the preseason tournaments like Kespa Cup or Nest or Demacia?
I watched some of the Kespa Cup.
What do you think of the meta in general and like the turret plating especially?
Like the big problem I had when I watched the game was I assumed like they did all those other years that it would do the really drastic changes in the off season. But as you referenced before, it doesn't really look like it actually looks like they're trying to maintain some of the things they had for Worlds, which I'm kind of confused by because I thought that was like a one-off, you know. So like, what do you actually think the difference is from what we saw in the Worlds meta? Does this actually make, like, will the game actually have some macro now? It won't just be like skirmishes all the time.
So
I think it's, yeah, you go for it.
So turret plating actually made early game so much more important. So each plating is worth 160 gold, and there's 5 plating across 3 lanes. So if you're winning your lanes, right, 160 gold like per plating, and like taking that off and like recalling and actually getting to buy and then denying your plating, and then plating goes away and the turrets become paper, and then you can take the turrets down. It actually became more snowbally.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're gonna see even worse version, or not worse, like more amplified version of early game and laning and like early skirmishes mattering so much more. Like, go ahead, Razz.
I don't understand okay. I absolutely don't understand the intent with some of like the preseason changes, where it's like initially coming into it, it's like turret plating, lanes last longer, like protected laning phase. Like theoretically, you come out of laning phase with like more gold, like, or at least it's on an even basis, and then you can come back in like late game. I thought that the intent was to move towards
that. That was the intent. Yeah.
Then it went in the absolute fucking opposite direction. Preseason, for like the last 2 preseason changes in a row, I just didn't understand. And I think that this time around, the fact that you're right about way more gold being pumped into the early game for towers, and then now dragons literally have like 10% on the first one, so you're like, wow, that's a lot for your first dragon. I remember looking back at season 2, because season 2 was known as the season that's snowbally around gold.
Ignite Jax, Ignite Irelia, yeah.
Exactly, and like you basically need level 6 because the dragon itself, the dragon gold, was like snowballing in and of itself. This one's actually that much more on crack. Only thing, the difference is obviously that one was more focused on one single objective. This one is on like 2 or 3. So like that's the case, but now people, why not just go early game? Like even more early game. Why not just go to an early game jungler, mid laner, top laner? Like Ignite in top lane might be a thing in competitive. So I have no idea. Like I think that it's so weird.
Does that imply then that we will also get a carry on from Worlds, which is that if early game is strong, and especially like obviously having the best laners is the best, does that naturally make the solo laners kind of inflated and more important than having a good but maybe not the best bot lane?
1000%. I thought Demacia Cup was a good example as that as well. I thought that literally when I looked at the top 3 teams from Demacia Cup, and it was like, oh, you have Maple, Rookie, and Knight. They both styled on their individual matchups throughout the entire tournament. I was like, that makes sense. If you have a great 2v2, if you have full control of mid lane, you lose bottom lane control. Like bottom lane, the major thing that lost the TOP the entire tournament was actually just like the bottom lane 2v2 versus Jackie Love and Balan was not that good. They lost consistently even when their tower dives happening topside. So I think the most defensive aspect of this meta is literally towers doing 1 million damage, because like the entire tournament was based off of like people still trying to tower dive, and like there are a lot more fails that came out of it. So but like that's not going to just stop them. I think China, if this tournament, or at least if this meta moves on to like throughout the entire year, then pretty much the same expectation. The game's a lot more early game based.
I mean, Riot has an intent to change that. Like they when they implemented turret plating, they said we want to see more variety of champions played. So now early game champions, if you are winning, you can get gold from plating. But the late game champions, by having plating, your turrets will be protected and you'll get extended laning phase. You will get to lane. The game won't just accelerate. So that's what Riot wants. And I think Riot will brute force that like sooner or later. And they're also changing the crit items, so they want to see AD carries in a better position. So there is going to be some brute force changes.
That's true. I think the good thing is that like the 48 resistances they put on the towers too before they left on vacation. So like I like that.
What about this then? Based on what you just said, yeah, it makes sense why you'd be confident IG can come right back and be incredibly good in China. Does this affect RNG though? Because one of the storylines I tried to stress to people at Worlds, people who only saw RNG internationally, was I I don't fully buy into the double lift logic, but I do feel like it was RNG specifically that made people think you had to play the game through the bot lane because their best player's Uzi. Like, it makes perfect sense, right? But the problem is, this is why I always stress to people, the reason why it's so criminal that RNG couldn't make it further is they had the pieces everywhere to play whatever style they wanted. Like, I know he's just retired now, let me, but people don't realize this guy doesn't have to just play like fucking a tank and be like a Maokai slave or something. Like, he could play all sorts of stuff. Like, they really could have gone. Obviously, everyone remembers a couple of years ago how good Xiaohu was. Like, this is a team that could have played any style. So, do they have to play a different style? Can they do the 2018 style next year, RNG, and be the best team still?
I don't think that's what I think is the biggest problem with RNG. Like, the biggest problem is, like, I know, like, the Chinese audience will meme Uzi and talk about his flash. Like, that doesn't actually matter. I don't give a damn about what Uzi does because Uzi was still dominating. The problem is when we get into like an actual serious series, they throw everything away and put it into Uzi. Like, you're right about Xiaohu. Xiaohu is known for his LeBlanc. Why did we not see him play LeBlanc? Why was that never a thing? Like, Xiaohu is a great assassin player.
So maybe the memo didn't get out there.
It's like, I don't fucking get it, dude. RNG's been a team that's like, they'll put into Uzi. So I think that you're right. Whenever you go up against RNG, or if you're just literally RNG in that series, it becomes a vacuum in that bottom lane. And I think that the key is always to play away from it. RNG this time, they have Amazing J on their team, and he's the type of tank player that plays towards the bottom side of the map. So, like, that's what you're pretty much going to expect. I think that they're going to really require the meta to change if they want to be number one. I think they're number 2, number 3. But right now, if we're talking about, like, best team, if they want to be able to regain that, they definitely need the meta to change.
This is a question for both Razz and Thorn. Razz, do you watch any basketball at all?
Oh, hell yeah. You're talking about my topic now.
Okay. So, you know Russell Westbrook, right? He's like a superstar, triple doubles. Like, I mean, fuck all the like knee surgery recently and all that. But some people view him as like,
he's garbage.
As what you think?
Wait a minute.
Wait, some people view him as like a flawed superstar where you can
cancer, play ball hog, makes his own numbers, doesn't make the team better. Yeah, some people at least, I don't know who do that. I mean, I actually personally don't even call him Russell Westbrook. I've said this before. I call him Chockle Westbrook.
Oh my god.
Because he chucks about 50 fucking bricks a game, and about 18 of them go in, and then, some rebounds that miss, someone puts that in, and then they go, oh, there's a fucking assist, and he gets like a triple-double or something. Like, it's the most garbage basketball player I've ever seen.
A lot of people...
Obviously a hyperbole, but keep going.
Okay, a lot of people rate Russell Westbrook really highly, but they call him a flawed superstar, that you can't win with him, and that he's a ball hog, and when the moment comes down to it, he has to have the ball, and he kind of pushes the other stars around him. That's why Kevin Durant left. That's why James Harden left. Does Uzi share that similarities? Like, is Uzi like a flawed superstar where if you have Uzi on the team, it's impossible to play around the other lanes due to like the pressure of having Uzi and also Uzi's voice?
I think a year ago I would agree with that. I think the only thing that's stopping me from agreeing with that this year is literally the regular season, where it felt like everyone was getting the chance at the ball, right? It felt like mid lane was getting a chance. Xiaohu was like having great plays. He was able to play like assassins and all that. Thought that Let Me once again had that chance. But then the only way I have no idea anymore is because when it came down to that best of 5, they still put into his, like, basically in his basket. So I guess, you know what? I agree with you. Last year was the same thing. This year was like an entire regular season that gave you hope, but then it went into the best of 5, and they're like, nah, dog, that's not happening. But like, even like, to your point, without going down that rabbit hole, like, Russell Westbrook is learning the same damn thing because, like, Paul George is getting a lot more of the ball this time around. So I feel like the learning curve is still like being they're still learning a lot more. Felt like Russell's learning throughout this season. It feels like Uzi's learning now. I think the major lesson is that you should trust in the regular season, because in the regular season, if one thing is working, if you can trust in every player, if Karsa is doing well for himself, like, you can put it in Karsa's hands. But, like, you don't have to throw that all away when you get into the final best of 5. I think that's the major lesson for a lot of these teams, is to go true with that. Because Uzi, another flaw that he has is that he just disregards the meta. He plays to what is his champions. Hyper carries when possible. Like, Zio is something that was initially added. Like, when the majors, when the bottom lane were happening, he did not play that. He said, nah, I'm playing AD carries. In fact, I'm playing Kog'Maw when there's a Brand in the bottom lane. And he was getting blown the fuck up at the end of summer season. So like, I think that's his major flaw, is that he doesn't change when the meta changes around him. And in Worlds, people were tricked into thinking that that way was the right way to play, and then slowly that moved away from him. So I think that's his major issue, is that he's a man that doesn't change. And perhaps to your point too, like, they play to him no matter what. So yeah, you know what? Roundabout way, yes.
The problem with that topic is, like, it is Uzi. Like, if it was a normal AD carry, I'd kind of be with you on that angle of, like, if it's not if the meta doesn't suit you, or you've got great players elsewhere in your team as he does, at that point in time, you have to kind of give it up a little bit. You have to let them have their shine, do your part. Eventually it all comes around. Eventually you'll get your chance to be the carry again. It's been a very bizarre meta that meant you couldn't really be the best player in the team. The problem is, it is Uzi though. Like, first of all, if people probably won't remember this, but years ago, I think it was season 6, was when they made that change where Uzi joined OMG. And if you remember, OMG was a team famously that was the top half of the map, because it was what's his name?
Corn?
Cool. And
Going.
And Gogoing. Yes, it was these 3 players were like the stars, and they were also like sort of the best buddies, and the deal in their team was sort of like, we run the team basically. Well, when Uzi joined that team, because he actually was the guy who'd never won shit, and they were all champions, been in Worlds loads of times, he actually did, believe it or not, most of the time in that team, like have games where he just was like a little bitch, where he just played fucking Sivir, and they just did whatever they wanted. The problem is, this Loco, team didn't work. Like, that team was actually amazingly unsuccessful for how stacked it was with players. And unfortunately, the fact it didn't work and just wasn't even at all relevant for going to Worlds, first of all, probably like scares a player like that off when he's tried sacrificing and it didn't work. Because remember, the worst thing that can happen is you tell a great player, listen, if you sacrifice, we're going to do better and we're going to win. And then you don't win. Well, you just taught him a lesson with, like, that's like negative reinforcement. And like, he's going to think, fuck, that doesn't work. I'm going to do the other thing. So then the other angle is, like, unless it's an extreme meta like this, I think most of the time, even when people say like, oh, at the moment, it's a tank top meta. Yeah, that depends who you have. If you have like Smeb, you can probably still play some carries and probably still find a scenario in which this counter works. You can still dominate, So like, I kind of see both sides of it. Because like, to give the basketball analogy, there are many great players who will take a shot when they have a player guarding them, even though their teammate might be open. Because the problem there is, yes, in theory, the open player has an easier shot, but he doesn't if it's one of the worst players on your team and the guy who's being guarded is your best player and a player who's amazing going one-on-one. And obviously the thing with Uzi is he kind of does have that forgiven thing of, like, the dude has played like 2v3 his whole life. So he doesn't even see it as a problem. He's like, right, another challenge. Let's take it on. So I think that's just kind of like, I think it's going too far to imply like he's kind of like, you can't win with him. You definitely can win with him. Whether you can win Worlds, I mean, that's also down to the meta as well, to be fair.
Yeah, I don't think people are, I don't think he's scaring talent off. I think people want to play with him too. So like 100% want to play with him. I would probably regard him closely to like LeBron James, where everything is circulating around him. Like 100% is around him, but like for the right reasons, because he's just that good. I think the only question is like whether it works or not, and you always need that second player that you can still play to. Like, you still need that Kyrie. So like, I think for RNG to, if they want to be a champion at Worlds, like, it sucks too, because like, this is the only conversation we have with them when after they won like MSI, like Asian Games, because like basically that was their team there. Rift Rivals and all that, but like when they get to the final, the final tournament, they didn't win it. But it's like, still play to that. You have to have a second player that can back you up. And I think Shahu had to be that player. And I think they just basically took the chips away from him.
Okay.
Who's they? Like, who is they? And like, when you say it, is it Uzi? Is it the coach? Is it the actual player?
Say that again? Who's staying?
They. When you say like they took the chips away from Shahu.
Yeah, coaching. Like, I think it's coaching. Like, cause I respect Hart as a coach, but like the drafting at the time was just very much like focused on taking it away. And I know like whenever it comes to coaching staffs, you have no idea what the hell they're doing. So whenever you like give them props or take it away, you're like, what the hell am I actually, like, what am I basing it off of? But the drafting alone and like the going back to the same old style, that's still like, you still have to put that to the staff. Even like Uzi as a player too is taking a step back from controlling that stuff too. So he's willing to play whatever the hell. He just wants to play what works. And if the coaching staff tells you putting power into Shahu works, then it will. So I think at the end it came down to that.
Okay.
Right, what about this then? Even though obviously there are some other teams we can talk about, I thought a fun one to bring up at this point in time, just because people who don't follow the LPL will know a bit about some of these guys, is the team you referred to before, which is Sunning. So obviously
Yes.
they've made wholesale changes throughout their team. They used to be an all right team, on the rise. Like they were actually pretty decent like this year, especially in the summer split. But the team now is basically completely different. Like they kept the top lane of the jungle, and aside from that, they got SMLZ, who by the way definitely goes in that category I was referring to earlier with like Flandrian, Clade, like really sick player who just happened to not be known because he's in the LPL, and so people only know him if they watch the LPL. Very good AD carry. And then the two big names obviously they brought over is SwordArt and Maple from the Flash Wolves. Everyone knows what the Flash Wolves have done, a number of like playoffs at big international tournaments. These were the two players that everyone really loved, along with Karsa, who's already at RNG. So what do you think about this Sunning team now? I mean, on paper, like super team's always hard to justify because it's such a contentious term, but it's a pretty high-powered kind of roster, right?
Yeah, I like whenever we talk about super teams, like LPL, the key term, like I never want to abuse that word because you use it for IG because they literally have best players, and you want to use it for RNG because they try to literally get the best players domestically. But like Sunning, I would call them a super team because they got the best players in the world. Like SwordArt is best support in the world, like consistently hits that market. The only thing you would take away from him is that he plays in the LMS, so no one has eyes on him. And then at the same time, like the only time you see him perform is at an international events, really. And you still attribute a lot of their great macro to him. So like SwordArt is one of the best supports that you ever actually want to have alongside you. And SMLZ, I know there's this like, we give people titles of best player to never make it to Worlds, and last time around it was Score. Well, Score made it to Worlds. SMLZ is that best player to never make it to a Worlds. Like he's made it to, like the international event he made it to is Rift Rivals, where technically, like even like the shittier teams that make it there, like fourth best team OMG of the LPL made it there, and sure he was there, but like this is a player that has been the second best AD carry like consistently for the past 2 years. And I know that like people when they have eyes on them internationally, they think, oh, it's Uzi, then it's Jackie Love, or Uzi, then
the guy for EDG, what's his name?
iBoy.
Something Boy, iBoy, there you go.
Yeah. So it's like they look at them because they are such fantastic players, but SMLZ has been that player, but way more stable. He's been super strong in team fights. Like the only thing you'd ever have against him is like his actual laning phase because communication's always an issue with him. But like he's so damn talented, and the fact that he hasn't made it to Worlds is disgusting. And so like Maple, you don't have to say too much about that. The only ones you don't actually know are Xiao that I already previously mentioned as like the second best top laner in China, next to TheShy, and then Hacker, who's always been skirting around top 3 and top 4 of junglers. So like if we're talking about Karsa and Ning, then I would have number 3 as either Flawless or that I have it as Hacker. So I thought that like the fact that they formed this team that is so damn strong mechanically, they're just chasing a championship, and they should make it to Worlds. Like with this roster, 100% barring like any drama.
What do you think on that, Loco? Because I notice in the West people are very. I always felt like people never give the Flash Wolves their credit because people always acted like, yeah, but they never really do anything beyond like upsets. It's like, yeah, but the amount of upsets they had was amazing. Think about how many times they beat Korean teams, SK Telecom specifically. It was unbelievable the amount of upsets they had. So what do you think of these Flash Wolves players, Loco?
Here we go.
If I have to pick 2 from Flash Wolves that are good, it would be Maple and SwordArt. It's just how to say. I'm not sure. So Razz gave SwordArt a lot of credit for Flash Wolves macro. I had no idea a lot of that came from SwordArt. I didn't know he was like a big shot caller or a huge voice in it. And as for Maple, where Maple has had incredible highs and he's laned well versus even players like Faker, like consistency is something like I hold extremely, extremely relevant and extremely important for me. And I remember 2018 being a down year for Maple. So I'm not as like, I guess like high on these players as Razz is, and like, oh, they're a super team and they're amazing, because I don't know much about SwordArt. I don't know as much about SwordArt, and for Maple, for me, like 2018 was inconsistent, and where he's held his own, there's times where he's, just not been that great. And also playing from LMS does take away a lot of points from you. You're playing in like a small pond.
Yeah, but then that means you have to only use those players, though, which is why I think this team's interesting. Because as you've seen with Carcer, etc., put these guys with some of the best players, and then they're not just like the big fish in a small pond in that analogy, and you've got a real team. So that's why, for me, for example, like, I'm not really surprised Maple wasn't at his best this year. He didn't have Carcer with him. That was the guy who was his fucking teammate all those years. The mid-jungle duo was like one of the main synergies in that team. He didn't have the dude this year. So I think if you look at him, he's another player you can put in that category I've talked about in past episodes. Froggen, Soaz, these players that just, they will never be bad. Like, they can have a bad year. They can have a period where the meta doesn't fit them. The team isn't the right one about them. But if I had to guess, which is more likely, that Maple just never gets to be really good again, or like all the other years, he was really good and he'll have one day, whether it's now or in another team, go back up. I'll say it'll eventually recorrect, unless there's something, I don't know, extenuating circumstances in life or something like. This is a player who, they've just done it for too long. People have to realize this dude was like at season 3 Worlds when he was back with that like fucking Gamma Bears team or whatever. Like, the guy was playing, he's another one of these guys who's been good since he was like 15 years old. So for me, I know some people, for whatever reason, like I say, maybe it's not even that they downplay them. They just don't tend to get much attention. But I always used to say this. Maple, to me, is always my example I give for anyone who wants to be like an apologist for Bjergsen. Like, well, no one can really pop off nowadays. Like, what could he do? He was playing against Faker. It's like, all the excuses they give for why Bjergsen almost never does fucking anything at Worlds and MSI, etc. Just go watch the career of Maple when he's at MSI and Worlds. Dude has like more pop-off games than Bjergsen does. Like, the dude has more pop-offs like each one tournament than Bjergsen does his entire international career.
Bjergsen is more of a game manager than he is a carry, and Bjergsen provides.
He's good at managing some shit games that fucking lose, isn't he?
All right, we don't have to go into Maple versus Bjergsen, but I think Maple versus like, they have different strengths. Like, they're different players.
Have an interesting discussion. All right, so. Let me just check, Razz. I don't know. I'm learning things here. Yeah. Are you aware that Maple?
Oh my god. Okay, fine. We'll fucking actually go into this then. Where I would compare Maple more closely to Jensen, where they're more individually very, very apt and they have more incredible pop-offs. But Bjergsen is someone that is a better game manager, that is more consistent, that has a better and a far more variety of champions and has always been consistent on that. Like, you took away Maple's 2018 because he didn't have Kartha. When Bjergsen had Odd One, when Bjergsen had Centurion underperforming, when Bjergsen had Spence Carrington, Bjergsen was still able to perform. Where I feel like Bjergsen is just much, much more well-rounded, and you don't see players like that. But I will give credit, what you said regarding Maple's pop-off in international tournaments compared to Bjergsen's are true, but you're just comparing him on that. Like, there's a reason why Bjergsen has been up at the top domestically and has never, ever had a bad split.
Well, what's the definition of game managers? Because like, if we're talking about Jensen and Maple, they manage the games by literally being the one that controls how you win and lose. In terms of like, literally, like Jensen's a great example of like pull resources through a mid, play through like he just get like insane solo kills or like completely control the game through his performance. I think Bjergsen is the kind of player that I think you can't question his performance domestically, but like those games go way too slow. And if we're talking about like controlling games through like calls on TSM were like super like bitch mode. Like, you would have leads and you're like, what are you doing with your lead? Why aren't you like moving right now?
Okay.
Like, I think that they're way too risk averse. And if that's like, if game managers like through like his shot calling, which he is a good a communicator, then I would take that as a negative, as a minus.
So where I give Bjergsen a lot of credit is like the flexibility and being able to work with everyone and fill in the gaps of certain players they have. Like, as we just talked about, Maple without Kartha looked bad, right? So Jensen has had a lot of problems with certain junglers. Like, Jensen with Svenskeren initially didn't work out, and they moved Svenskeren down and they brought on Blabber, and they eventually moved Svenskeren back up when Blabber couldn't perform on the world stage. Jensen initially with Meteos butted had so much, and they had to remove Meteos and put in High, where Bjergsen can work with everyone and he can fill in those holes. And I mean, all the negative things you guys say regarding Bjergsen, I can't say it's a lie. Like, definitely very risk averse, definitely like hasn't been good internationally, but there's like credits that I feel like isn't fairly given to Bjergsen for the stuff that he's able to do regardless of who he has around him and being able to fill those holes. Like, flexibility, being able to work with anyone and improve other people around him and fill in those spots aren't skills you need to perform internationally. And yeah, that's where Maple and Jensen might overshine them.
I'll give you the analogy, Loco, since you're getting into basketball, right? The analogy would be this. People critique LeBron James pretty harsh, right? Even though he might have been the best player in the NBA for like 10 years now or something ridiculous, like, or at very minimum, like what, second or third best player, outrageously good. But the reason people critique LeBron James so hard, ignoring like silly stuff like they don't like him as a person, because I'm talking about real critique of his play, is because, yes, his style is to set up his teammates and to make sure that the team's working well. And there have been times he loses games where it's like, if he'd have just taken over the game, he probably could have won that one game. But his logic is like, yeah, but like I'm trying to make like my team capable to win, and if we don't win as a team, probably won't win the championship anyway. So no point trying to win this one game. But the problem is, I actually feel like that he also has the same problem Bjergsen does, where sometimes he goes too far to that extreme. And while that principle is correct, generally you shouldn't sort of like make up for the other guy's mistake in a way that's like he doesn't ever have to learn from his mistake, and therefore, like he's going to fuck up later. It's like you should sometimes do that. Like you should try and set your team up, but every now and then there's a great Michael Jordan quote where one time in a game he was like trying to score too much, and one of the assistant coaches said like, "Hey Michael, there's no I in team, right?" And he goes, "Nah, but there's an I in win." And the whole point was he just wanted to win that one game. So I would say for both of them, that's my main criticism. I'm with you. There's an element to what they do that's underrated, and they can actually lose a game and have done the right thing. But every now and then, in most games, every now and then, the superstars are the ones that win you the championship. Like sometimes you have to take over the game. Sometimes you have to take risks. If you don't risk something, there's a great saying in English, an idiom, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So my problem with Bjergsen is this. Like, I think he's a very good player. I wasn't even saying, by the way, Maple's a better player. Didn't say that. I'm just pointing out that the reason why I think that they have actually been underrated is because of when you consider people praise international players so much, Maple's had a fucking amazing international career. And then the other aspect of what I would say on that line is like, I think sometimes those players need to just like, they can have their style, but you've got to have like a panic button sort of. And some games you just have to take over the game. Like every great player does it pretty much.
Or you have like a finisher with you, like LeBron had Kyrie, and that's when they were most successful. And I think when Bjergsen had double lift, that's when they were the most successful.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Yep.
I would have loved to have seen Bjergsen and double lift like stay together for much longer, and for the same reasons I would have loved to have seen LeBron and Kyrie stay together for much longer.
Well, along those lines, then, that is a perfect segue, because Razz, one thing Maple never had when he was in the Flash Wolves was a good AD carry. Like, they had some okay ones at best. He had the NL guy who everyone memed on. He was bad in domestically, but he'd have the odd okay game. He wasn't like the worst player ever. But when you consider they had this really good support player, but they never had the great AD carry. So we've never really seen what SwordArt would be like with someone. What do you think of that angle? Because that's the exciting part, right? You've already got this sick talent in SMLZ. Now you've got this shot calling support, and then you've got this strong midlet. Like, what do you actually think this team will look like when it comes on the server? I mean, it's already played technically, so give us some insight.
Yeah, I was just trying to be safe with them, so I put them like a third place in terms of like my overall tier list, because I gave a lot of respect to IG and RNG. But I think RNG faces the most danger for Suning, because Suning as a team, you're right, they have literally best of both worlds. They have great structure with SwordArt. They have I'd say Hacker as well really structures the early game and late game well, and they have a great closer with SMLZ. SMLZ is a fantastic closer. His ability to like outplay team fights later on in the game is next to none. There would be times where you're like, that's a hopeless team fight. I don't know why you're taking it. But like he would have so much damage output and great positioning on any AD carry that he plays. So I think like the fact that they literally have like not only just the mechanics from top down, but their style really works well of just like supporting both the smarts and like just the raw skill. It really makes it. So I think even true to Maple not having, or Maple and SwordArt having really an amazing AD carry to play through. Sure, like Betty was fine, but like no one's like SMLZ. SMLZ has never had a support who's as good as him, if not better. Like SMLZ had Love CD when he was on Masters 3, and he was just trash. And then like when he was on OMG, that was like the best support he's had, and that's 5, but he's not a world-class support. So the fact that he's right now with SwordArt, like right now SMLZ has no excuse. Same with Maple and SwordArt. These are players that have like so much to play for, because people will throw the criticism like LSMS is not really a region that you could play towards. Like, how are you a top player if you're not playing in a competitive league? And then they'll throw SMLZ. It was like SMLZ not the second best AD carry because like he's never been a Worlds, and there's always some form of drama like what happened to OMG. or I guess like Masters 3, that never really like had some longevity to it. But all of these players are world-class players. So 100% like they earn what they will get. Like Demacia Cup, people will say, well, they weren't in the finals, but they didn't even practice. Like at that point, like they were the team that actually formed pretty late and didn't get real time to scrim going into the tournament. So like that was their scrim, and that's what's crazy about it.
Okay, so while we're trying to get through some more, the other team that was at Worlds, let's talk about EDG. So Loco, you can comment on this one because one angle I wanted to attack this initially because the thing with EDG is they didn't make the big roster moves you would hope for. You know, they still have the same lineup basically, and if you were hoping that they were going to get some super duper player wherever it might be, jungle would be an obvious position. They didn't. They stayed with the same lineup. But the big change that did happen was their coach Norfei, formerly of the Rocks Tigers, went back to Korea. What team did he join? Afrika. Yeah. He went to Afrika Freaks, and then EDG got in Hart, who'd been over at, I know he was LGD in the past. Was that the team he was in most recently?
Hart?
RNG.
RNG. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes, there we go. So they got in Hart instead. Do you think the coaching changes, it does anything? Like, was Norfei having difficulty implementing what he wanted to do with the EDG team?
I think so.
I think
Go for it.
Norfei is a great coach. I talked to Norfei time to time. I was actually even teammates with him. Someone incredibly smart. Someone that's like a leader of men. Like Norfei, you want to listen to Norfei. Norfei is extremely charismatic. Like he's very family. He takes care of people. He's harsh when he needs to be. Like I think he's a great coach. And the fact that EDG lost Norfei, I think is a huge blow. I think there's very few people you can replace Norfei with and be like, oh, that was an upgrade. Like good job. No diss to Hart, but I think Hart is an upgrade over Norfei, and I think it's actually going to be worse for EDG. Go ahead, Razz.
Okay, all right, damn. All right. Look, I will agree with you on the fact that Norfei is a good coach, and I think that like in terms of like what vision we have on the coaching role is very limited. But like problem with EDG is there's something that I think that Hart actually has like experience with in really just giving a team a focus, something that they can play through. EDG had like they would be a team that would try to, I guess, be like an ING where they could like they would at times give Ray a carry, and so like you'd have Scout, Ray, and iBoy in the bottom side, and you're like, okay, you can just go ham. And technically, you could put Haro on that level too, because Haro is mechanically strong. He just green. So like, but the problem was they were never that team. They were never a team that was like strongest in their roles individually. Like Scout, sure, you can give it to Scout. Scout played well. But like iBoy and Mako had problems this play against like the top two. Like I'm talking about Uzi, and I'm talking about like a little bit of Jackie Love, but SMLZ as well. And I would just say like. And I think that iBoy is a player that like was way too risky as a player. Like he had issues in the regular season where he'd be like, yeah, I'm doing very well in this game, but then I would just like lose my team the game by just going all in randomly, just for either a tower dive, or there was a specific game where he was like 9 kills, but then every team fight he just jump in without his tanks. And like I think the mentality is incredibly important. And EDG as a team didn't have the right mentality of who were their role players. Near the end, in like the Gauntlet tournament when it finally mattered and they got into the Worlds, Ray was that facilitator. He was like, all right, put you on tank duty. That took a long time for that to happen. And it took a long time for like iBoy to recognize to literally be behind his tanks consistently, and discipline was a key factor in that. I think it's always hard to tell what control Norfei had in that, but I can say with certainty that Hart coming into the organization will be able to tell him with his experiences on RNG, like how it should be played out.
Okay, so let me counter that, and Doran can put it on his 2 cents. Okay. So I think this year was a very, very special year where so many rules that were true for League of Legends during its entire history got broken apart. Slow macro, vision play being very important got just broken apart completely, and bot play being center of it. So what I heard from Kelsey was Mako and Clear Love have a very clear vision of how they want to play their game. We want to play towards bot side. They were almost Korean, and we want to place vision. We want to play around bottom. We want to take it like steady. And then Ray also has his own vision of how he wants to play the game, right? I want to be a carry, like we saw him on Cloud9, like where he really struggled where he wasn't on a carry. So you have 2 very strong voices in Mako and Clearlove that wants to play a certain way. And then you add in Ray, who also wants to play a very different way. And then you have Norfei, who if I was Norfei, I would probably listen to Mako and Clearlip. They have a history of success, and I also believe the game should be played that way. But the rules broke completely this year, and the game changed in a way where we haven't seen it changed this dramatically before and this differently before. So while I do think this year looked really bad for EDG, and I can understand why they had an identity crisis, I think it's hard to say like a lot of the faults were on NoFe and like, hey, this is like NoFe's fault. Like this team doesn't have an identity and they're not functioning as a group.
And a good context to add to that, because I can agree with that, is the fact that Mako and Clearlove also disagreed. Remember, they were like, if we're talking about them being the main communicators in a game, like Mako at times was frustrated with some of the calls that Clearlove had, and so if like that's the state of what happened, and they would, like Haro would come in a little bit more frequently, then at that problem, that's a real problem. Now suddenly you have Ray who's young, Aibo who's definitely young, and now you have a green player of Haro coming in, and Mako is supposed to be the herder, essentially the like trying to shepherd these players in. So like that is a major issue that they really faced throughout the entire year.
I think it's an end of a dynasty, and that dynasty like with like the older parts like finally like breaking apart and like things not working together, and NoFe's just there to take the blame and there to like fucking get cut.
You could give the
did
analogy.
He actually get cut? Like that's the real question. I don't even know if he got cut.
I would guess he left personally. Do you think? Do you have some info, Loco? Was it implied he was cut?
I think he wanted to leave. I'll say this. So NoFe is married and he has a cat and a dog, and he's very, very dedicated to his wife.
Yes.
His wife is, I think, the 3rd generation buff girl, and like they live in Korea. I don't think NoFe ever had a long term in China, and he literally said, "Hey, if we don't make round of 4, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna I will like resign." Like if you really love your job and if you really like want to stay there, would you say stuff like that? Like if you really, really, really wanted to stay there, would you say stuff like, "Hey, if we lose, I'm gonna leave"? So
probably not, but a few people have been like, I think there's like a manager or something in EDG that did the same thing. Like I feel like that some people need to stop doing that in social media. But I agree with like the NoFe thing. He actually believed that in the sense of like, if he's not the best at one thing, why would he stay? So that makes sense.
I would agree on one level though, Loco, with like the analogy. You didn't push it with an example, but if you want to get an example of how like teams have success doing one thing and then they get trapped into thinking like this is the blueprint, right? We just keep recreating the blueprint over and over again. EDG, just like SK Telecom, domestically was an amazing team for a long time. And if you look at some of the players when they had Name and they had you, and then they moved out those players, they got in theory, similar types of players. Obviously not Pawn, but in terms of Daft and Name, they were pretty similar types at the time. You could slot them right in. They continued to play through the bot lane for years. The problem is when you come to this particular roster, none of the things you did before would work with this roster anyway. And then, as you're saying, the game changed as it is anyway. So, like, when I looked at this roster, I wanted to ask your take on this, Razz. Like, I don't even know if I could blame coaching staff, because when I look at this team, like, how the fuck do you decide what lanes to play through? Like, if you look at this team,
But before Razz answered that question, because there's some questions about Buff Girl, and for like the YouTube and like the people that weren't going to be able to ask the question, I want to answer what Buff Girl is. So Buff Girl is basically you go to like you get assigned a Buff Girl, and then you're a girl, and you go to OGN and you're like, "Hello everyone, welcome to OGN today. Today we're gonna be doing this giveaway. Please make sure you stay till the end." And then during the games, you're like, "Okay, now cheer for SKT. Everyone say 3, 2, 1, SKT fighting, SKT fighting." And then this is like it started, I think, in like 2nd or 3rd season of OGN.
Yeah.
So this is when all the pro players are like just very like new and like we're young, and then so you see the Buff Girl and then everyone be like, "Oh my god, she's so cute, like we want to date her." And then Ambition's wife is the 1st generation Buff Girl, and so Buff Girls were very like popular amongst players, and like almost after every season they would switch out the Buff Girl, but almost after every season of OGN the Buff Girl would end up dating a pro player. And I think by like 4th generation, like OGN caught on to that, and they're like as like production, they were like, if you apply to be a Buff Girl, like, please, like, don't date players. Like, the production were fucking pissed that Buff Girls were dating players and then, like, making a career out of it and then, like, advertising themselves as, like, a Buff Girl and, like, a girlfriend of, like, blah, blah, blah pro player. So that's what a Buff Girl is, to, like, explain.
Sure. By the way, when Loco said that, like, they change them out every year, it's not like they just get fucking worn out from the wear and tear of the male gaze in Korea. Like, actually, one of the interesting things about people like that is the sort of girl who gets that role at OGN is the classic sort of person where if you've ever been to LA, you have met this sort of girl. You know the girl where you meet her and she's a waitress and you go, "All right, are you trying to be an actress?" And she goes, "Well, actress, singer, TV
so
host,
those are called
weather girl."
Slasher, so you're actor slash something. So in LA,
Exactly.
you call those girls slashers. Oh, she's a slasher.
Yes.
She's a model slash actress.
But if you notice, a lot of the people who do that role, like on esports stuff in Korea, they're not necessarily people who are like super into games. They just see that as a way into the entertainment industry, and they hope someone sees them and thinks they do a good job, and they go to some TV show or something, right?
Yeah. Sorry to distract, but that's what a buff girl is.
Anyway, so Razz, the angle was this, like, if you look at these players they have, like, realistically, I don't even know how you can formulate this into what it should, EDG hopefully should be a championship team, a team that can win the LPL. Because if you look at this squad, like, the two players that kill me are Ray and iBoy, because iBoy, thanks to just being very inexperienced, and to be fair, the dude is Chinese and AD carry, and he's in the LPL. Like, if I'm the Chinese AD carry in the LPL, and I get on EDG, I'm sort of like, yeah, it is my time to be the fucking star, thank you. Isn't that, like, the whole point of why I'm alive right now, and I'm all those things? Got all the checkboxes, haven't I? Can we play through me? So you have to pretty much play through iBoy. But then, as you alluded to before, everyone who knows Ray knows him from when he was in Cloud9, and they only used him to play the carries. They used Impact for the tanks, him for the... Well, the problem is, like, if Ray's the guy who has to just be a tank player, that doesn't feel like the best use of his resources, Like, what do you think? Because I'm kind of depressed there was no roster move with this team. I thought they'd have at least one change,
Yeah, I think the change that I was probably looking for would either be top lane jungle, and not even necessarily like a hard shift. Like, they can just bring in...
Dude, imagine if they'd have gotten that Let Me guy in.
Oh, Let Me too.
Oh, imagine that.
That'd be good too.
Imagine if they could have got a player like that in. That would be immediately you're starting to fix the lineup naturally.
Yeah. And like, I think that EDG as an organization always has faith in the players that they bring up, because they've always been, they were the first team that really like lined up youth teams and all, literally just like had two like LSPL teams, a TGA team. They would have a million players they would play through. So if the player came through their system like Ray originally did before he went to North America, they had a lot of faith that they can make it work. And the fact that 2018 for them, they didn't make it work. Like, you can theoretically look at it and be like, they went to Worlds, check that box. They went pretty deep in terms of like the getting to quarterfinals. Check that another box. But like, realistically, throughout the entire year, they were just not competitive, and it's even getting harder this time around because like other teams. Remember, franchise probably killed EDG the most because like there are a lot more big market teams now that can afford the best players that EDG could in the past. Like, EDG no longer...
We're going to talk about some of them soon. There'll be teams, and we referred to one earlier, Jingdong Gaming. People aren't going to know this, but some of the players they have on this are way better than some of these EDG players. It's actually kind of, I guess the analogy, it just shows how franchising has affected every region. It's the same reason everyone can see that TSM, etc., doesn't have all the best players. They have decent players, some good players, but the old order is naturally gone in a way.
Yeah, you have to throw out whatever you had in terms of like your mindset of like who the best teams are, or at least who's the big money teams are. Because EDG no longer can be the team that'll be like, yeah, we can easily have the first say at the best AD carry or best mid laner in the LCK if we have a bad season. That's not the case anymore. So like, building up talent is what they used to be really like, are still very good at, but now they have to like put 100% in it. And so I would have liked a Let Me being rotated in with top lane as well, even though internationals just make it like super hard to ever make that a thing. I think that having Let Me and like Let Me coming in and splitting time on the top side would be really good, alongside just having the same deal with Clearlove and Haro. That would have been a really good formula.
Well, maybe we should talk about that topic again, because it's another abstract that we can discuss. You can give us the specific of the LPL, but Loco, obviously, is a topic you can definitely talk about, because Korea, along with China, are the main regions that long before Cloud9 and Reaper is hailed as a fucking genius for like, he's like the guy who in sub-Saharan Africa like invented the wheel in like the 20th century. It's like, dude, we had that ages ago. Like, this idea of like, wow, it's revolutionary. He has subs for different positions who play differently, and he puts them in to change the composition. It's like, China has literally been doing that forever, and Korea's been pretty fucking good at it. There's a little team called SK Telecom who played without even a real fucking jungler, and won Worlds doing it. So, these regions are pretty good at it. What do you think on the LPL side of it though, Razz? Because as you allude to, one of the things at the moment is a downside if you're the LPL team, and obviously RNG knows about this, is if you have multiple subs and you're doing a legit rotation, like you really do bring this guy in, but you also bring in this other player, and then you have a third player. If it's the Demacia Cup, you might test out, so people might not know there was a sub AD carry for RNG who's very good actually, called Abel, but you never get to see him because there's only one sub allowed at Worlds. So what do you think on that angle? Because it doesn't seem like LPL thinks to themselves, well, if we're only going to be allowed the one sub, we better play that way throughout the year. They still do it as though it's an open thing, and they only seem to worry about it like a week before Worlds. So they're like, shit, who do we take out of these three guys? Like, what do you think on that angle? Because clearly it's been, would you say it's a good approach?
I think it's a good approach. It just kind of sucks because it burned a team like RNG, I think. Like, it gets to a point where you're like, it's great, especially for the LPL where you have, like, so many games to go through that it, like, just in terms of resting, it's fine. Like, Uzi didn't play a lot of the summer split, or like there's times where he just like, okay, I'm going to be coming back at the Chinese New Year's. We'll see you then. He was actually even slated to come in, like, later on, but, like, they were not winning. So they brought, like, they had Abel, or they would have in another player. And so, like, I think that's the best way to play, is to be able to, if you have that many games, have players that rest other players. But on top of that, like, if you want to be able to test who, like, push other players as well. So, like, for instance, like, MLXG and Karsa, MLXG pushed Karsa. Karsa pushed MLXG. Like, there was a time where Karsa just first came in, and you would expect them to just kind of, like, work with the team immediately. But remember, you're in the LPL, and so a lot of the unexplainable wins are like, hey, you know, this is not probably the best jungle pathing, but it's definitely working because he is essentially, like, playing as aggressive as possible and creating direction for his team. Karsa had to learn that. And so for RNG, Karsa got better because MLXG was there, and MLXG got better vice versa. I thought that RNG got burned because TheShy would have been wonderful with the meta that Worlds had to offer. He could play Urgot and Aatrox to a T. Like, people will remember Rift Rivals for his Aatrox play. And so in Foresight, you can say, well, why don't they just bring TheShy instead of Let Me? But their intent was like, hey, Worlds might be like teamfight meta because we won in teamfight in Summer Split, and the best of 5 we had with IG was like based off the Ornn play. Teamfighting is a go-to. Let Me is the better version for that. But like, they didn't have the option to be like, well, going to Worlds, while that's changing around us, we can change our players. I have no idea why that's still the case in Worlds. I think that Worlds should be like, obviously there'll be like low econ regions and teams that'll come in with only 5 players, but like, I think that's just the state of the game, that you should be able to say that we can go to another player in our organization, and you'll just have to be able to respect that.
Well, do you think Loco is like more of a, like, it doesn't have to be about the LPL, but just the concept of using subs in this way? 'Cause it is a very Korean thing as well, right?
I'll just talk about it a little bit in reverse, like going off what Razz said at the end. I 100% agree. Like, it shouldn't be catered to the low economy regions. Like, it should be, if you're going to allow 7 players on the roster, or if you're going to allow 10 players on the roster and 7 active roster players, then it should be that way for Worlds. What's the point of holding regular season and then going back on your rules? Like, it just makes no sense at all. Then, honestly, if that's how World is going to be, that's how regular season should be also. It should be 6 active players on the roster. If that's how you're going to do Worlds, that's how regular season should be also. There has to be some kind of consistency and congruency between regular season and Worlds, because that's what people are ultimately competing for. As for the subsystem in general, it comes in Korea and it comes in China because it originally starts in Korea and China because there's just so many good players in Korea and China where you can have 7 great players on a team. And for the system to work, you need multiple players that are great, or it just kind of becomes like a really awkward situation.
Like a leeching situation.
Yeah, it's really awkward when you put in a top laner and he's not as good as like the original top laner you subbed out. The rest of your team is like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, we want the original top laner there. There has to be some valid reason that player is playing in there. So I think it can be something that's very successful when you have multiple talented players on the same roster, but when you don't and you try to force it, it's actually really negative. That's why I think it failed a lot in NA in Europe, and that's why Cloud9 was actually able to do it with players that people didn't think were good. Like Blabber and Golden did not originally hold LCS spots, but they later became LCS caliber players due to their development on Cloud9. And because LCS usually takes any kind of player that is LCS worthy and puts them on an LCS team, like, it doesn't happen that much in NA in Europe. But as we see Academy be more and more robust and we see better and better players coming up from Academy, I think that's going to happen a lot in North America and Europe also. And
one good thing about North America is that these Academy players are living in the same house. Like, that was a good thing in China as well, is that, like, you're performing in a different league. That's fine. Like, you're going to be competitive in that area. But also you can still, like, be able to soak in the environment, soak in the structure, learn a lot more. So, like, sure, like, the alternative is like you're on the same team and you're just leeching experience and like lessons from the other top laner. He's like, what the hell is actually happening behind me? It's like what? Like, is my position just threatened because I'm teaching this other guy something else? Well, I guess like in the current academy system, like technically it can be similar, but you don't have to worry too much because he's like playing in a completely different league. He's not going to be really interacting for the year, which has been the case for a lot of these organizations. In Europe, it's different because I feel like I could be. It depends if I'm getting challenged on this one because like they're in other national leagues.
Yeah.
So if your academy league is literally like a national league, then they're probably not going to be in the same house at all. And so like I'm trying to figure out how that's any different than the previous system where you're just like, well, we didn't really watch Turkey or Spain. Or like, so how are we actually getting information on how a player is good unless if we literally watch or just hear from like a player about solo queue?
Okay. One thing I want to add is like with people living in the same houses. So back when Korea had sister teams, like we would say stuff like Samsung, the team of many great Yasuos. And I don't think it was a coincidence that Samsung had two of the best Yasuos in the league in both Pawn and Dade. Like Dade picked up Yasuo really well, and as Samsung white scrimmed them, they're like, oh, Yasuo is really good. Like, what are some things Dade is doing with Yasuo that makes Yasuo really good? And Pawn can easily pick up on that. So a lot of the sister teams shared very common picks that they were strong at, like SKT with both Azir on Faker and Easyhoon, Faker notably picking up Azir from Easyhoon. I think that's going to happen a lot more. Like with academy teams in NA, like living in the same houses sometimes, like you're able to pick up, oh, Bjergsen's really great at Syndra. Whoever's under Bjergsen can pick that up easily. Oh, this Dardoch's really great at Lee Sin. Like maybe Meteos learns to play Lee Sin. Actually, that's not a great example. I don't think Meteos and Dardoch are really going to share information and they're more likely going to compete. But when there is like a mentor or like even on equal levels where people are willing to teach each other, like it's so good for development.
And to your point, like 100% in North America, like there's just not that much. I'm talking about like similar level talent, people chasing each other, world-class talent. Like in China, it feels like there's just world-class talent that's literally sitting in some of these LDL teams. So like they can easily be slotted into that system, and you'll be like, here's the real benefit for him to be in the main squad, or for him to be in your sister team and in the house, that you can learn from this guy. And like, okay, that's something. But if you're like in North America, where a lot of the times, like if you're an AD carry, I'll say like Doublelift is your best, and he's a world-class player. Obviously, the European imports that come in, but we're suddenly talking about imports coming in and not the domestic talent. We're just talking about domestic talent. Like there's a sudden drop-off in terms of world-class talent. It's not there. So yeah, I would agree with that in terms of like it's so hard to actually have a sister team of people living in-house and have that be a good environment.
Okay. Dorian, do you want to talk about Chinese solo queue a little? It's something like very famous about China, like there being like 23 servers. There's also now like a competitive server that's not Ionia, that's separate just for like people need to get account to play on. Razz, can you like tell us a little bit about Chinese solo queue, how Chinese solo queue works, how competitive it is compared to like I guess Korea?
Yeah, so you already mentioned about the servers. There are a lot because obviously China is huge geographically, and also on top of that, just like the amount of players. So if like North America had 2 servers, you're already splitting a small player base. But in China, you actually need to do that. Remember, after Worlds, after China won, like the server, the main server, the Ionian server was like overloaded. Like I was in a 30-minute queue time to just get online in the game. Like it was insane to actually just start to play the game because of that. And I already mentioned Ionia is the main server because like that's like Shanghai, so all the competitive players are here. So if you want to be on like the most competitive server, you want to just take like lose a little bit in terms of ping. Then you can like play like maybe 60 ping, but you're across the country or something. That's a benefit. Or you can play on the super server. You have to be like Diamond 2 and above on the regular servers, and you can just join. And now the only reason why this works is because there are literally that many servers like that just combine into one. So you have like challenger players from all the different servers playing in one. This is solo queue only too. So like there's only solo queue as an option. So the queue times
I
are
believe
super
that was
quick.
the one, right? That when Dopa played in China, he got to the top of to win that big prize, wasn't it? Wasn't that like the super server that he had to do it on? You remember that famous thing where he won like $100,000 by getting to the top of the solo queue? And famously, I did an article on it. It was actually a mad story because like people were even like purposely griefing him to try and stop him from getting to the top and stuff. It's like some mad anime story. It's like one of the most fucked up stories of all time. But
Monty said esports is an anime. You can't use. He said don't talk about esports and anime together.
He means like it's real life, you know, as in he doesn't like it when people want like a storyline, like, well, my favorite player must win of that. But like, I normally use it as an analogy for when like a storyline's like too over the top, you know, it's too extra. Like they would do that in an anime, like they'd make the character like, you know, it'd be so obvious. Like, I'll give you a great example. Like someone in like Ray in EDG would be a great anime character because obviously like he was originally going to try and be on EDG years ago, didn't make it, had to go to NA, was a fucking like failed challenger player, then magically got on a Cloud9 and got like they got rid of him, and then somehow, who knows how, he ends up right back at the team he wanted to be on. He gets his chance to go, fails the first time. Obviously now he has to go away in the off season. He's just chopping wood, you know. He's hitting a block that's got like fucking TheShy's face on it. Motherfucker, he took everything. He's like fucking Nate Diaz. He's like, TheShy, you took everything I worked for, motherfucker. I'm coming for you. He's like, you know, he's just leveling his way up. Now whether he makes it or not, that depends. Sadly, Monty was right. Life isn't an anime. Probably just fail and be a fucking piece of shit, and I'll probably flame him. But, you know, it's not my fault. I don't write life. I just write straight fire burns for what does happen in life.
Okay. What were you even talking about? Oh, solo queue.
Back to solo queue.
Yeah, like you're just talking about solo queue, competitive, and also just it's probably the same in Korea because I know the players around the world go to Korea and it's like, my goodness, level ones you just can't rest, you can't go to the washroom at all. Like there's always a level 1 happening. That's been the case. Like just recognizing that Chinese solo queue is almost exactly what you expect in terms of competitive.
Aren't you, Razz?
Huh?
You Canadian, mate?
Yeah, I'm Canadian.
I actually didn't realize it until he said washroom.
Oh no, is that specific to?
Yeah,
oh,
it's a bathroom, don't they? Washrooms are a Canadian thing, mate.
Oh my!
Giving it away
goodness.
now, mate. It's all for
Washroom
you.
break. Yeah, I'm gonna take my loony. All right, but no, seriously, but yeah, it's super competitive, super fight oriented. So like in terms of like top level, you're just getting a lot of team fights, a lot of like activity, jungle moving from lane to lane. So like that's where I would say is the difference between Chinese solo queue in North America, or maybe even, let's say, even Europe, because there are just so many players that you have that many separate servers and a super server on top of that. The fact that you could even get into Challenger to begin with on the main Ionian or super server, it's just like a mechanical game. So that's why I enjoy just watching it.
Okay. Oh, Razz, talking a little bit about you. You started out as like a coach, right, for Dignitas?
Yeah.
What was the era that you coached? Was it like the Kiwi Kid era?
Well, wasn't Kiwi Kid like in a lot of those areas? Like my team is because
Kiwi Kid stole checks for many years.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Oh no. So like my team is like, because I came in from Dignitas EU that turned into Splice. I went into the North American roster, which we built as Smitty J, Cure, Shifter, Kiwi Kid, and Apollo.
Oh, so you're the European era.
Yeah, the European era.
Okay.
And like that was like just talking about that one a little bit. I didn't even plan to be the head coach initially. I was initially announced as like an analyst and head analyst and assistant coach.
Yeah.
Like things changed. Like you go into the house and like
Shit happens. Yeah. I started TL as content creator, and then after a week, Steve's like, "You're head coach."
Yeah. You're like, Jesus Christ, how'd this happen? And then like I think that the lesson from I had from that split is that things never go according to plan. Like it doesn't matter like what you set up or literally what you see. What you have to rely on is your own, I'd say, confidence, B, knowledge. Like literally you need to be as good as possible to deal with the punch that are thrown at you. Because my ass wasn't even on stage until like week 6 or something. Like that was the time around where people took it like very seriously to have a work visa coming into America. So like for me, I was like, all right, I guess I'm head coach. I guess I'm gonna be on stage. Oh wait, I guess I can't. So like my manager has to be on stage. So it's like, yeah.
There's been a lot of transfer or a lot of overlap between like casters and coaches, like LS both casting and coaching. Kelsey going from like an analyst or like a content creator to like coach, and then like with you also. Like, do you think to do casting or content creation and coaching, there's a lot of skills overlap, and why do we see so many people switch career in between that?
I think the largest skill overlap that comes in is game knowledge. People respect your game knowledge. People will watch your work. If you're a content creator, you have to be a hell of a like exciting figure. But even if you're an exciting figure, if you're like if you have no knowledge to back it up, why would they watch you? Like Tyler One is the most exciting person to watch, and he's a challenger player. It's like if he was the most exciting person to watch, but he was like platinum or like didn't have any backing or knowledge behind that, then why no one would watch him? Like absolutely no one. So you have to respect his game knowledge first before you move into the fact that you realize he's entertaining. So like content creators, 100% they watch your content because you're entertaining and you have the most knowledge on like one champion or whatever it is. And then as a coach moving into it, then you have like knowledge on top of that. So I think that's what it comes down to, like 100%. I mean, the entertainment comes in later. People have to respect your knowledge to begin with.
Yeah, I can actually answer that a little bit because I've noticed it's been the same in all of esports. Because believe it or not, all esports games in the West took a similar approach to League of Legends, where League of Legends, it was earlier to get coaches for every team because obviously Riot literally made a stipend. Like they basically agreed to pay part of the coach's salary if you got a coach. So everyone had a coach at that point in time. For obviously, worst case scenario, just to get the money, even if you were some team like Orion who maybe didn't really use him as a coach. But you know what I mean? Like you get someone in there to take that role. Well, in every game, so in Counter-Strike, we had the same thing. Initially, teams never had coaches because they were like, wow, do we need a coach? They did this basically the same thing Chousey did on the last episode that I referred to, where you just go like, this guy's shit compared to me. Why would I ever listen to what he has to say? But eventually, you get so that coach is a thing, and every team has to have a coach. So now the problem is, you, especially until you're years into the game, you have every single spot in the league has a coach required. So the demand is incredibly high, but the supply is almost non-existent because where are all the coaches? That wasn't a role before. So you can't have good coaches because they didn't exist before. So the first people you're going to go and look for is people who were like super nerds at the game of League of Legends and basically watched every demo, studied every player. And who are those people going to be at the moment? It's going to be a content creator. It's going to be a commentator. These are the people who it's not a direct overlap. There's definitely loads of skills in coaching that have nothing to do with being a caster or a content creator. Likewise on the other side, but the basic overlap at the starting point is good enough. And then also you've got some fame off that. Like people at least have seen some of your game knowledge, or you talked about another team that seemed like you could do research. So I have to say it's actually a very positive sign that a lot of these people get jobs now as coaches, because that now means that coach has gotten enough like respect as a role that you don't feel like you're going to throw your whole career away if you have like one bad year. And more importantly, it actually pays now. In the past, commentator, if people knew how much Monty used to make casting the English stream of OGN, because remember they used to have that subscription model back in the day. So it actually used to be a money maker for OGN. He used to make not only way more than the Riot casters, but fuck anyone who was a coach. There was no one on his level. Why do you think he stayed in Korea doing that and then on the side did CLG coaching? Because CLG could never have afforded him. It wouldn't have been worth the money they would have paid for him. So the problem is we actually have the same problem in a different sense as to what used to happen with a lack of people who could be a coach. We used to have that problem with journalists, because back in the days as a journalist, if you were really good at that job, you either just went like, oh, well, esports was fun, but I've learned my skills, time to become a real journalist in the real world, and I'll make like a real career there. Or you just became a caster or a coach. You know, you moved on to a job that was better. So I would say that that's like the reason why that's the obvious people you draw from. But that's also for me where the distinction has been over the last few years, where we found out who like the guys with the real coaching skill was, because a lot of those people I've just described, the Kelseys of the world, obviously, if you want an analyst, they can already do that job. It's basically what they do in their own life anyway. Some of them, like Kelsey, for fun. They're actually that sick that they really would watch every fucking bad LPL game just to know what's going on. The problem is, that type of guy is obviously amazing for strategic coach. But yeah, we've seen that probably the role that still has the biggest demand but the smallest supply is like the head coach type role, where it is the real coaching skills. Like those are the tough ones, because even the people who are going to be good, that's going to take a while to develop.
Yeah, that one took some time. For me, like my biggest problem with the coaching, especially at the time, was like I always felt like there was an issue in terms of stability. Because when I was coming in as an analyst or head analyst for like teams, I was just like in college at the time, you know, university, and so I was like, well, I mean, it's never going to be my ultimate goal. And so when I came in as like a coach, an Australian team, or like with Jingdong, I was like, yeah, I'm not in house. But when I was like, I had the opportunity to go in house. Like that was a fantastic experience, but for me, my issue has always been in terms of like stability in the roles. So I went towards casting because I felt like that's something where I can find personal growth, and there would be a lot more of a like, especially in coaching, where it's just like you don't want to have like that one and done situation, or trying to struggle work, or have the nonsense of like every split being like, I don't know if I'm working this split, or if I'm going to be in this region or not. That's too much stress in terms of like, if I'm not going to be doing something consistently, then I'd rather go back to university was my thing.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, that's also the other downside, is until it becomes like a really respected and a role that you can make money from. I also don't blame people for not wanting to be coaches who actually might have the skill set, from the angle of like, yeah, if you fail, like, what have you got? You've got nothing at that point in time. Everyone's just like, fuck this guy, and like, you don't get any respect. You want it to be like, if you're a content creator or a commentator, there's still stress, it's still a job, but there's a lot more like day-to-day fun than being a coach, I would say, because you don't have
for sure
losses.
Yeah.
Like when Loco said before, like, when he was coming into TL as a content creator, yada, yada, yada. No one needs to know the real story. We all know what it is. Then he got put to the head coach because they had no one else. At the time, he was probably liking it at first, Razz, when he had the good results. He almost made the finals. But you know what? Eventually it got to him. He had Dardoch just flaming into his face all the time. Piglet was like, no, you fucking play my way or nothing. Like, he just like, is so unreasonable. So he thought, right, you know what? Fuck this. I'm tired of the stress. I want to just kick back, do some content. Like, let me partner with this Thorin guy, getting flamed all the time. Everything has to be his right back in the same world again.
I'll say this.
Circle.
So a lot of things me and Thorin do is like, what is it? I mean, we overplay it, but the amount of stress this causes is like 1/100th of the stress I experienced on TL and like Golden Guardians and like TSN. It's like 1/100th of the stress.
Of course.
I would take every day getting flamed by Thorin than like working for like a team. Like teams, I eventually in the future I will work for a team again, but like at the moment, like
every team in the LCS will take that deal. Can we sign some sort of contract now?
No, but like, what is it? Just the amount of stress comparatively to like getting flamed by Thorin, it's nothing. Thorin could flame me every single fucking day of my life, and I would feel less stress.
One thing I hate, and I think is getting so much better right now, is team houses. Team houses is disgusting, dog. I hate living in a house with like 4 other.
Dude,
I mean, it depends on how large your fucking structure is and how many people you have in that coaching staff. Like, that's ridiculous. There's never that separation between work and actual your own time. So for me, my issue is just always like, you wake up, you always feel like obligatory. You have to go 100%. And even then you're like, I have no idea what this has turned into. So like, that's the stress of coaching and trying to deal with it. And a lot of times for me, like, big challenge I had was a lot of confidence. Because when you get, like, for instance, if you're doing well in scrims and then you just get hit in stage play, you have no idea what the fuck is happening. You're like, oh my goodness. Like, literally that, like, sense of, I would say insecurity, or like just trying to figure out what's going on. It's nonsense. There's too much, like, looming stress in a game house.
So I'm gonna ask Razz one more question, but we're gonna still open up to viewer questions. Like, guys on Twitch chat, like, ask viewer questions, like, ask good questions. If you ask like some dumbass question, obviously we're not gonna.
I'm ready for the dumbass question.
Okay, I guess you can ask dumbass questions.
Before we do this question, let's do one more team, because even though most of the other teams aren't that relevant or won't be that good, there was a team that we started to talk about earlier that I think we have to address, because he only talked about the middle of the Yagao, which is the Jingdong gaming team. Because Razz, correct me if I'm wrong, but this team has some fucking really sick players on. So what is the actual like ceiling for this team this year?
Like, remember last year, the whole Griffin hype? I feel like, and I'm just talking about Griffin not as like new team coming in, but a team that didn't have a chance to make it to Worlds because they only made it in the summer. Probably was the same case with JD, because like they got Coach Ohm, previous coach of Team WE, like world champion.
I prefer to call him the shittest player to ever win OGN champions.
There we go. But he's like a god tier coach. He's a god tier coach, and like he's a coach that really changes them into a championship formula. For JD, the moment they got Coach Ohm, they were great. And we're talking about specifically the players, like your gal we've already made a mention of. Zoom was already like, their solo laners are god tier. But on top of that, you're talking about Clid, obviously moved to SKT, is insane mechanically, and that's something that SKT like fans should really hone in on, what Clid has to show for them. Like, I feel sorry for the casters already, because like our first challenges was saying the name in team fights inconsistently without having like obviously the expletive. Like, Clid is so, I know, I'm saying, you get the problem. It's a hard life out here saying names. But like, he is such a good player mechanically. And then Loken now moved on to TOP, but Loken I thought was like such a top tier AD carry. Like, mechanically in team fights was always on top. His Lucian was his best. Now the problem, like going into this split, they lost those two players, Clid and Loken. Now, you already saw in the recent announcement they brought on Imp. So Imp is now going to be the AD carry for this team. And I am so sick and tired of people coming out and saying that he's like washed up player, because they're so quick and willing to throw the whole washed up tag on like a lot of the older players if they have like a bad year. But Imp has been on LGD, God rest his soul, like that team never has direction, and then like went on WE for a brief stint, like the stint as in like you get to play 2 games, you played well, but like we're immediately slotting you back in for Mystic. I'm gonna say Mystic is better for sure, but like Imp is not washed up. Imp is still a top tier AD carry. I'd say like there are a lot of AD carries in the league, so like he has a lot of competition. I'd say like in the midst of the competition, he's probably like mid tier, but like in terms of like worldwide, he's a world class AD carry still. And then in the jungle, they brought in Levi, and they lost their chance with him, and they have Flawless. So like immediately they've already like replaced Clid with
Flawless
very much
is a
like
stud, right? For people who don't know.
Yes, Flawless is so sick.
Oh
And,
shit!
like,
Let me tell you guys an incredible story about Flawless. This
All
one
right,
actually has so much relevance. So,
okay, I want to hear it.
okay, 2016 TSM. Lena says she wants to do a fan meet in Korea. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna set up a fan meet. So I talked to Inven, and we set up a fan meet at Inven for just like TSM fans, where we go there, like we answer questions, and then like we play games and we take photos with people. Okay. So, and then one Korean dude comes up. And he's like, oh, hello. And then he says hi to all the players. And then he comes to me separately. And he's like, oh, Locodoco, like, I used to be, like, a really, really huge fan. Like, I love you. Like, I looked up to you, like, forever. Like, and I was like, oh, thank you so much. And then he's like, I'm a pro player. I was like, oh, shit, really? What's your name? And he's like, my name is Flawless. I play for Eris. And then I was like, oh, shit, that's fucking incredible. And then he's like, what if I love your coaching? I want to get coached by you one day. And I was just like so blown away, and I thought like this guy would turn out to be like a nobody, but he's like someone that's like really good and like turned into someone successful. So he's a mega
Yes.
Locodoco fan.
Oh, there we go. Is that why it's relevant, Loco?
Yeah, Dorian,
Loco, you gotta-
that was a good story, right? Dorian, that was a good story, right?
You know the sad thing, Raz? Because he gave the caveat, I actually let that one ride. I thought, let's see where this one goes. But inside my head, go back on the VOD, everyone, and look at the moment when he's saying this. As soon as the story becomes like, and then he's like, I'm such a big fan of Locodoco. I knew that was it. I knew that was the story. I knew there was no final act, no punchline. The whole thing was a humble brag that a sick player now once said to Loco, like, I'm a really big fan of yours. And then, like,
He came out to our fan meet during like holiday time and
Yeah,
like
when he
to
was
just
nobody.
see me.
So what you're saying is when he was a nobody, he was a fan of Locodoco and TSM. Then he turned his life around. Now he's a fucking amazing player playing in China. Might go to Worlds this year. Yeah, that lesson for the children out there. Give up. It's time to break the habit. Let's just move on. Listen, there's a biblical verse. It was the Apostle Paul. He said, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I played with childish things. But now I'm a man, I put away childish things. That's the thing. Put them away. Move on past Locodoco. Become a champion. That's my message to the young Koreans of the world.
God damn, fuck you.
Anyway, so, right, at the risk of spending all night talking about how Loco definitely didn't spend 3 years dreaming of dating a buff girl, should we ask some questions of
Sure.
Raz
Okay,
from
so
the chat?
one question that's getting asked a lot is about Levi being on Jingdong Gaming and then like him living LA. So, I mean, it's mostly toward Razz, but like my 2 cents is I actually didn't think Levi was that great in NA. Like, he didn't fucking carry NA Academy playoffs. Like, I'll say this. So, players like Phoenix, players like Fly, they fucking one-man carried Academy, or Challenger. And Challenger was so much harder than Academy is, because now Academy doesn't have, like, veterans or imports. Like, Academy is just Academy. So, if Levi is really that good, like, he should have been able to fucking one-man carry Academy. Like, 100 Thieves didn't do that well in Academy, so I'm actually kind of down on Levi. But now he's going to LPL. What's your thoughts on Levi in LPL and Levi in general?
I think Levi, I think he's a type of player that you have to, if you bring a player like him on, you have to really give him the resources. You have to like give him the system to thrive. I think the lasting impression was when he played in Rift Rivals, when they brought in like basically like Brandini and all that, and he was still styled in that one. So like, I think that his, even though remember like I haven't seen Academy all too much, so like I didn't see him playing shit or like not really thriving as much as other players. But like just being the idea that you bring Levi in your organization and then you put him through Academy, I think is already just like the bad idea. Like you don't bring a player with that much hype and then you kind of throw him in. And I think that to be fair to 100 Thieves, probably not even the right pickup. Like, they had 2 imports to begin with, and you're never getting rid of someday. That's never going to be a thing that you do. So, like, they already were in a pretty much a strapped position where you're not going to be using an import like that unless if it's, like, someday jungler, like, you know, Levi, and then an American AD mid laner. And I feel like that was never going to be the case for them. So I think for 100 Thieves, it was, like, pretty much a lost case. Another team could have picked him up. So I think, for me, Levi is sick. And coming into the LPL, super hyped. The only issue that I have is that Coach Rome is the type of coach to, like, not run subs too often. He creates a line oftentimes between, like, you're a starter and you're a sub. He did that with WE, and then when he left, or at least when he joined JD stopped doing it. So a lot of the times I'm going to be expecting that if Flawless plays, then Levi might have the same situation he did in North America. So that's the only thing I think is unfortunate. But, like, they have the problems of having too many good junglers. Like, what can you do if you have too many sick junglers in one lineup? I'm very high on him, but I don't think he's gonna play all too much.
Dorian, your 2 cents.
I didn't watch much Academy, so I think I saw like 1 or 2 games. I don't know, because here's the thing, like, I was never super high on Levi anyway. Like, that GAM team to me was, like, I've noticed this is the thing that a lot of people have trouble evaluating, like, especially in League of Legends compared to other games. Like, if it's Counter-Strike, I can see even if it's a bad team, if a player's legit good and the team is bad, you know? But because of the way League of Legends, the game works, where, like, certain picks are stronger at certain points in time and then they're never played again, or the entire team is getting more powerful because of the way the items work in the game and you're ahead in the game. It makes it so tough to tell who is actually a legit good player and who happens to be in a team that's playing well. That distinction gets really hard. Obviously, you can figure it out when you have enough sample size. So my problem is, when I saw all those upsets that GAM was getting, and even ones that, like, or the ones they almost caused and, like, still lost the game, that looked to me like, I didn't think any of those players were, like, super duper players. It looked like as a team they had really good cohesion, and whoever was coaching them understood quite cynically, like, this is our only chance to win, is doing some of this weird gimmicky shit. Let's just do it. Let's fucking go for it. Why play, like, you know, why play a normal game out against teams that are better than us with better players that we're going to lose? So my problem is, I wanted to see, like, I haven't really seen who Levi is, because I've only seen him in that one team be good, and then Academy, as you said, he's just thrown on an Academy team. No one really knew what the direction is. He's supposed to stay on the academies. He's supposed to work his way into the main roster. Can't work his way in the main roster. They've got the 2 imports. So I agree. Like, even though I'm kind of like in between the two here, I never thought he was super sick on GAM. He certainly had, like, some talent, just a bit one-dimensional, I thought. So I think if you put him on a team that played around that style, super aggro team, let him do whatever he wanted, probably could be pretty effective. But to kind of fall down on Raz's point there, I just don't know why they would use him that much in this team, especially if you've got Flawless. Like, you would think you're probably not going to get to play there. It's kind of, again, he's on another team. I don't really know what the point of him being on this team is.
Yeah. Okay, so go ahead, Razz.
Yeah, I'd say the only thing I would disagree with the whole Gigabyte Marine point, where I feel like Gigabyte Marine was a team that he was, like, the star player. And if everyone else is ass on a world-class stage and you literally have that one star player that they just, like, that was, like, the style that was almost necessary that they had to play through him. So, like, he was someone that just needs an opportunity because his skill is, like,
yeah, but it's going to be kind of extreme to get a team to play through him like that, though, you know. Like, listen, I'm with you, but to convince someone to do that, like, put a whole team through you resources-wise, etc., you better be an amazing player to get that kind of status, right? There's a lot of people wish they could have that status.
Okay. Yeah, I think, once again, when you have the skill, you can do whatever you want. Like, in terms of, like, technically, you can still play the JD style in the past, where it's, like, play through Yagao or play through Zoom. Like, anybody you can technically play to. So I think that he can fit with it. It's a weird discussion because it's probably not going to happen with Flawless on. So, yeah, we'll see.
So, a question that viewer asked is, with CoreJJ joining, is it going to have the same kind of effect that Huni and Reignover had in Season 5-ish, where they upped the bar for junglers and top laners? Obviously, I mean, I disagree with it. I don't think CoreJJ is that much better than the support. So, I guess to kind of reframe the question, what kind of impact do you think CoreJJ joining is going to have on NALCS and for Team Liquid?
I think for Team Liquid, it's so good. The one issue Team Liquid had on an international level was, like, just base confidence in some individuals or the calls. And I think that the last thing you want is an individual player like Ole had in MSI, and sometimes in Worlds, was just, like, his own individual confidence that the team would have in him, or just he would have himself. CoreJJ is a world champion. He doesn't have that issue. I think Ole would work if he was just a lot more of a competent player. And I think that it's hard for me to say that because I have no insight, obviously. But like, if you just add in CoreJJ and Jensen, suddenly the only problem you'd have is just like maybe going too deep. Like, these are very headstrong players that they have.
You know, I've said this before, Loco. Like, people always get the idiom in English is the cart before the horse, because obviously the horse is supposed to lead the cart. And if you put the cart in front, it wouldn't go anywhere, right? So people always get the cart before the horse and think it's people like me or Monty or you on this show, and that we just for no reason bring up TSM and bring up NA, etc. We don't. What we do is that is the only reference point most people have. So the reason why I'm saying this is because we're not the meme. It's people who are watching this show and people in the Twitch chat right now. You're the fucking meme. Because we've literally got a guy here where, like, this guy knows everything about the LPL and has been watching all the games. Any questions? You think Bjergsen will be the MVP? Are you fucking real? Like, grow the fuck up, whoever's in that Twitch chat. Anyways, another question, Loco.
Okay, sure. One another question.
Grow the fuck up, Twitch chat.
Okay. No. This one's towards Doran, but Razz can, of course, answer it. It's more towards overall of esports. So Heroes of the Storm recently had like a whole departmental shutdown for esports. Do you think, so someone said if League of Legends or Overwatch doesn't bring the same kind of profit in the years to come, do you think that Riot or Blizzard could have the same kind of shutdown for League of Legends or Overwatch that Blizzard had for Heroes of the Storm? And also in general, what does like Heroes of the Storm esports shutting down mean for the entire industry?
Well, the big problem there and the key difference, the key distinction, this is why it's key that they didn't just ask about League of Legends, because the three different examples we want to give is Heroes of the Storm, which just got closed down, League of Legends, which has the LCS, NALCS, all these different regions, and then the Overwatch League. Now, first of all, the Heroes of the Storm approach. Remember, Heroes of the Storm was never a massive esports game. It was never an esports game that was like, we've got a record 1 million unique viewers on the grand finals. So actually, Heroes of the Storm was an artificially grown esport. Like, the only reason it was ever that big is because Blizzard came along and said, we're going to give all this prize money, we're going to have a whole circuit, we're going to pay all this stuff, and we're going to use the logic of that, like, fucking classic Field of Dreams, and we'd be like, if you build it, they will come. But actually, it didn't. No one did come, unfortunately. Like,
the people that came were second-class League of Legends players and mostly college students, because they had, like, that Heroes of the Dorm stuff, and the League of Legends players that failed went to Heroes of the Storm.
No, it makes sense. By the way, it was the exact same thing with all those Asian FPS games like Crossfire and Sudden Attack. I went to a tournament once that had like a Sudden Attack tournament there, and I met these guys and they were from America, and I was like, what the fuck? No one plays Sudden Attack in America. And they go, oh no, we're like low-level Counter-Strike players, but like we just found out about this game. We're like the world champions now. And I was like, what the fuck? And they were like, yeah, we're going to keep playing this shit. It's sick. And I was like, holy shit. So anyway, my point there is, it makes total sense that Heroes of the Storm, eventually they just decided, like, I mean, remember, Blizzard themselves is like a company through the Activision Blizzard aspect that's like partially owned by Tencent. This is another company that's now feeling sort of the pinch of like your overlord people saying like, hey, this has to make money. Like, you can't just keep spending money for no reason on this shit, which was the approach in the past that Heroes of the Storm and Blizzard and WCS used for StarCraft. And obviously that did exist to some extent for League of Legends. That's why you saw this year all this pressure from Tencent of like, slash the world's budget, start getting all this stuff in line, like focus more on making the esports side make money, make sponsors, etc. Push the franchising aspect because they want to make money from it. So League, luckily, unlike the other two, is quite an organic game. It already had a massive viewer base before it ever got any money. It already had had everything except the infrastructure initially. The key for me is the Overwatch League, because the Overwatch League is a lot more in line with what Heroes of the Storm is. The one reason I think it's different from the Overwatch League, and this will bleed into why League of Legends doesn't have to worry, even if the viewing figures go down, is since so much money has been invested in the Overwatch League by all those real world sports teams and stuff, they're not just going to cut it like overnight. Like, the whole reason they invested is because they were sold by Blizzard. Like, this isn't like you get your money back in 2 years. This is like, we're going to all be here for 10 years or 20 years. So I think if they shut Overwatch League down, even if it failed, I think it's going to be like a minimum 5 years, if not more. And if not transition it to something else, then, maybe make it small regional tournaments or something. And then that's the other angle that I think makes League a lot safer, is that the reason why the Overwatch League is whack, if I'm being honest, is it's supposed to be this massive tournament with all these millions of dollars. It's just one league. The entire world has one league. And then you have these sub-leagues. Like, that sucks. League of Legends, that's the same with the Heroes of the Storm thing. One big circuit that matters. League of Legends has every region can sustain itself almost at the moment. Not really sustain itself. Everyone's still bleeding money because everyone's invested and inflated the salaries. But like in theory, if people wanted to run, if everyone agreed tomorrow to run their League of Legends team as a business and not go outside their margins, it could actually be a sustaining esport. It would be one of the most successful esports of all time. So the difference is there's way less sort of risk involved with League at the moment. And since it's not artificial, well, the problem with artificially being put up, it's like if I agreed to give you every month $10,000 for doing this show with me, right? If one day I just say to you, actually, I've changed my mind, I'm just not giving you anything this month, then you might just stop the show because you'd be like, well, I was going, you know, my budget before was like 10,000. Well, I've got nothing. Well, there's no reason to keep doing it then. So that's the problem in this scenario is like in the League example, I don't really see why they would put it, like it hasn't had a drop off as much as like for start of the game, like Heroes Storm never got going. But you see my point there is like League is way more stable in that sense than those other games. Overwatch League is the one that's in danger. But to be fair, I don't think they're just going to, like, I think they're going to use the sunken cost fallacy and they'll just keep going. Because at this point, like, we're closing out like a fucking $1 billion is going to end up being pumped into this thing over like 3 years or something. So I don't think they're going to overnight just shut that down. Because they weren't really selling you on what today's Overwatch League is. They were always selling you the dream of tomorrow's Overwatch League, you know. And so I'd say League is way ahead of all those games and actually has a lot more organic components. Like, if Riot really wanted to, they would never do this. They could do the opposite of what they've done the last 5 years and decouple from each region. So give Korea back to OGN, give, I don't know, LMS back to Garena, give Europe back to ESL and that, you know, they could do that and it would still be, wouldn't be the biggest esport game in the world, but it'd still be a pretty big esport game. You know, it could be number 3. There's the difference. Those other games could only exist with like Big Daddy Warbucks just doling out the money for no reason because it's his game, which is Blizzard. So I wouldn't worry if I'm you.
Razz, anything?
Yeah, I would just say that one thing I think is super important is pushing competitive in your own specific region. So like one thing that League of Legends have done with ease because of the organic nature of it is because like LPL has been there for so long. LCK has been there. European League's been there. And I would love for Overwatch, because like I'm a fan of watching Overlap. I used to play Overwatch a lot. Is like when I came to China, like there was already a meme in my office or just like around that. It's like, you know, the meme of it being like a dead game or something because like people didn't play as much as the other games. So I was like, I wish that if like they didn't take the best players, Korean players, I suppose, and then put them all in North America and just really suck the talent away from every other region, I thought that the game would be really nice, like, or at least a lot more popular globally. I don't know. I haven't followed it since then, but like I think that's the only thing that I really was upset about.
Like, put it this way, just go and look at the viewing figures for like a fucking like TCL, like Turkish League final in League of Legends. I'm not exaggerating. I guarantee they've had finals where the viewing figures weren't that far from like an average week of Overwatch League. So like League is in a way better spot. Like I wouldn't worry about that. I know Heroes of the Storm makes it seem like worrying, but it's apples and oranges for me on that one.
Okay.
Also, last thing is that it's so funny seeing the difference between the Chinese broadcast and League, just about the whole like sponsoring nature, and this like literally global League of Legends, where like an European LCS and the NALCS is just like you, like maybe the one sponsor you'll see is like that sub, I forget what it's called, like something Joe's or
Trader or no,
like that.
Yeah, fuck. Something.
Yeah,
Yeah. Something subs.
Like,
Yeah. Sandwich.
Like what's happening here? Like the only
Joe
sub that you see,
sandwich
like,
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And then
Jersey Mike's. Yeah.
Jersey Mike's. There we go. I'm like, wait a minute, that's your like. I was like, I was so confused about that. And then the Chinese broadcast of the LPL is like legitimately sponsors galore. Like a random car sponsors of like Mercedes Benz, and you're like, what the hell? Like, ain't nobody out here riding a car. Like, it's like, but they can like, but they just basically care about the monetization of it so much that there's monetization just about every aspect in the LPL. And so like this is sheer difference between that and the rest of the world is pretty incredible to me.
Okay. Razz, one person was asking about Snake. So even talking about Snake, I also want to add on a question to that. So this person was asking, how do you think Snake will do? Do you think they'll be low tier? What the fuck happened to Crystal? I remember there used to be like an 80 carry named Crystal for Snake that was like incredibly good. I don't hear about him anymore, and I didn't hear about him during this show. So like I'm kind of curious what happened to Crystal, and yeah, how do you think Snake will look?
The point about Snake and how they'll perform this time around, they didn't make any real changes. They made a change to like their mid lane and technically 80 carry to the Crystal point. They brought in an LDL 80 carry named Asura, so like technically a little bit worse. So I think that they'll just actually be worse off when they were already pretty much middle of the card last time. So like they're not looking to be as good. I'm still like they still have Flandre and SOFN, but they're always that team that has like a flavor rather than just being the best team in the league at a specific area of the game. What happened to Crystal, man? Like right now, he's. I think that there's like a discussion that he was still in contract negotiation, which is why he wasn't still in the team. He's been that franchise player around with Flandre since he's been there since the beginning. But like in terms of it, like the game, all that matters is skill. Like if you were at the top of your league, if you're at the top of your game, your people will talk about it. People will sing your praises. When he first came in the league, he was known for like getting all that resources. Like he was like the juggernaut composition. Like he would basically you put in so much into Crystal, and he would carry you the game like in the regular season. But then that kind of starts to chip away at you when there are other 80 carries that are better than you in lane, that are better team fighters than you, and suddenly Snake wants to be able to reach far like higher heights, and they don't know how to do that without like going into other talent. Like this year, 2018, they had Light as an 80 carry. I thought Light was great. I thought he was like a young 80 carry that was better mechanically than Crystal, but Crystal now at this stage of his career is the veteran who knows how to like communicate with his team. So now there's that juggling. But yeah, Crystal's career has been like he first came into the league pretty hyped up, but then like he had issues of just like map awareness and then just like talking about individual skill in comparison to the people at the top.
Okay.
There was 1 week where I was like, my God, Crystal, like throughout the entire regular season, I was like, split. I was like, Crystal's doing really well. Like Snake are doing so damn well, and it's because Crystal is hard carrying him. So like this is looking to be the next 2 weeks strength of schedule. It's pretty tough. Like he has to go up against iBoy, SMLZ, Uzi, and like another 80 carry in the span of just 2 weeks time. I was like, this is a real test. He got smashed in those 2 weeks in lane, and it was like so bad. Like legitimately, those 2 weeks were just like, well, I guess he's not. I guess the hype is out of there right now. And like that's been the issue with him. He's always been like very good, but not better than the top 4.
Yeah. And as Raz referred to earlier, when there's that much talent in the league, and especially AD carry obviously has been a position they have emphasized forever in China, if you're not like really good, potentially bordering on the best, well, may as well try someone else. They might be. That's the crazy thing. Like the guy I alluded to earlier, no one knows because you have to have watched the Demacia Cup or the first like 4 weeks of LPL summer this year. Abel, that guy was. I watched some of those Demacia Cup games because I was thinking surely RNG's not going to be any good without Uzi. They were fucking retardedly good. It was ridiculous how good they were. Like that guy could be an LPL player now, but he's not going to be because he's sat behind Uzi. So he's only going to play when Uzi is not playing.
And another thing is Rogue Warriors is a team that like they got stripped of their best players, and I expected them to be so bad because they literally have a team completely of like LDL players and a streamer. And like that streamer that used to be an LDL player, named Zhang Wuji, is actually sick. He came into the Demacia Cup and then just like hard carry. So like suddenly like that's how easy it is suddenly to just dip into like a young talent that you're not too sure about like how they'll perform. Like he's like the guy who's like, oh, a Vayne player, a streamer, and everything. Think of him like Gosu. But like, and then suddenly you bring like Gosu into like the LCS, and like, holy shit, he's sick. Like there's just so many good players that it's actually super easy for the LPL like teams to organization to be like, well, we'll just look in here a little bit, see if there's anyone better.
Okay. So I think that's gonna be the end of the show. Dorian, what'd you think of the LPL episode?
It was all right.
Yeah.
I would just say this. You've got to try and do what I did for you a third of the way in the show, which is it can't just be like it's okay if it's Chouster because a lot of that was like old school stuff. We can't just both only be interviewing the guests. You've got to sort of like
frame you.
Even if say it's a topic like, so obviously you don't watch much of the LPL, but there's still things within the LPL you can talk about, and there's things that are concepts that you could talk about how it worked in Korea that he could then do to China. So just find a way to either generate topics, or if you don't have one, just let me know.
Okay, I'll do my best.
My
to
one
do
piece
that
of advice I'd give you.
All right, Razz. Any final word that you want to shout out your Twitter or your time on the show or what you're gonna be doing in the future?
I would say like, shout out to the friends I've had like throughout the entire year. I mean, not even just the people who are constantly watching LPL, asking questions about LPL. The casters, like commentators that I've been alongside, like for instance, like God bless Rosker now in the European LCS. Rusty that's going down back to Australia as a coach. So like, there's going to be a lot of new opportunities that they'll have, and there's just going to be a new face in the LPL. But you know what? You've got me. 2019, God bless. I almost forgot the damn year. 2019 is gonna be real good. Like literally, just watch the LPL because you already have like champions coming back, and it's just gonna be as hectic as it was last time round.
Okay. Oh, Doran, I wanted to tell you this live, and I wanted to see what your reaction was. So I went on this show called Streamer Showdown. It's like hosted by Chanman and Mark Z, and then it was versus like Mo and Dom, and I fucking like killed it on the show. Like, did you know like I'm Mensa? Did you know I'm 148 IQ? Like I never get to really show it because I don't coach anymore, and like we don't do like IQ kind of tests. But like the show had kind of a little bit of like IQ parts with like league lower part, and I like fucking destroyed. Are you proud?
I mean, you weren't exactly competing against like the fucking the honor roll there, where you're more and fucking Mark Z or whatever. But yeah, well done, you killed him. I mean, it was a way for you to humble brag that you have 148 IQ and remember mention, but I'll give you that one, Loco. You need one every now and then, mate. So you can have a little break on that one.
Well, you never like.
It's just a shame none of that applies to League of Legends.
I don't know how this show became this way, but the show just became. We get a guest. And then the guest and you just shit on me the entire show. I don't know how. I don't know how the brand of
formula. It's a winning formula.
I will admit the formula is good, but I don't know how the show turned into that.
Loco, I'll tell you what. This would be a good way to end the episode. Here's what you should do, and I have told you this. You can confirm this. I have suggested guests to come on this show who almost certainly do not like me and would probably flame me.
They don't want to come on because they don't like you. That's the thing.
Pussies and no, it's not to do with not liking me. They're pussies. Like I know these people. Some of them are even asked to come on my shows in the past. So it's just that they're cowards. If you can get someone who doesn't like me, Loco, you can try and team up with me. But listen, homie, I can go 1v2. I'm like forgiven. You can come with that guy and try and get the bot lane. I'll body both of you while fucking smoking a cigarette and then moonwalk out of this bitch.
All right. Well, Razz, thank you so much for being on the show. Doran, thank you as always. I'll see you guys later.